The story begins by showing a lone adventurer who ended up breaking all known taboos in that world. In one of the first scenes, this man is seen fiercely devouring a red minotaur. His arm, which was completely broken, begins to regenerate right after he consumes the creature's flesh. The system then reports that he has acquired 2 skills, Roar and Battle Axe. Meanwhile, the man screams in rage and a massive aura explodes around him. Nearby monsters watch his transformation. A diary from an old noble is mentioned, revealing that devouring monsters is a taboo. For humans, it means absorbing the creature's evil essence. The first symptom of this process is an uncontrollable frenzy state, accompanied by destructive superhuman strength. The second symptom is intense headaches, nausea, and severe poisoning. When several monsters rush in to attack him, he charges forward without hesitation. The third symptom mentioned in the diary is sudden death. Even when surrounded and captured, the man keeps a fierce gaze and vows revenge. It is then suggested that by devouring many monsters, there is a possibility the human might transform into a monster himself, a creature corrupted by the evil essence he consumed. The adventurer continues killing monsters and devouring their flesh. With each new defeated enemy, he gains new skills. He learns analysis, echolocation, and absorption. Next, a gigantic serpent appears while he is eating the head of a wolf. By devouring that wolf, he gains increased agility and activates the lightning cloak skill. With this power, he electrocutes the serpent and defeats every monster in his path. Thus, he also acquires the skills of poisonous mist and web manipulation. After a long period of battles, he becomes extremely exhausted. Even so, he believes he can get out of there alive. When he thinks it's over, a new horde of monsters appears before him. Still, he remains determined, convinced that he will survive. The story then shifts to a new setting. Now it takes place in Bologna, a city on the border of a territory filled with dungeons, but one in particular stands out, the Miasma dungeon. This place is avoided by many adventurers because the air inside slowly corrodes their bodies. Even so, the protagonist always returns there. Over time, he came to be known as the Butcher of Miasma. Upon reaching the 6th floor of the dungeon, he finds a heavy concentration of miasma. However, he finds it exciting and feels he will get good results from this visit. The grass that grows there has the ability to purify the miasma and has become a valuable source of income for him. He harvests only what is necessary, thinking it would be enough to last 3 days. Soon after, he notices the presence of miasma rats. Many of the monsters in that dungeon use poison and miasma, which explains why adventurers hate that place. But the protagonist believes none of them are a threat to him. He crosses the toxic cloud and kills one of the rats, but 2 others attack him right after. He continues fighting, facing huge creatures, when suddenly someone shouts fireball. The spell hits the rats and prevents him from being devoured. Next, a group of 3 adventurers appears beside him. One of them says he missed the shot, while another scolds him, saying he should have gotten closer before casting. The protagonist recognizes the faces from the Adventurers Guild. One of the boys approaches, extends his hand, and asks if his name is Rude, saying he looked like he was in a tough spot, so they decided to help. Rude refused to shake the boy's hand and stood up on his own. Still, he thanked them for the help. With irony, he said he would have been more thankful if they had warned him before throwing a fireball his way. The boy replied that's exactly what he did by shouting the name of the spell. The fattest one in the group then confirmed that the miasma grass colony was really there, and they all commented on their luck in finding it. But Rude was suspicious, finding it strange that they had followed him to the harvesting point. One of them replied that they were just adventurers trying to survive in a dungeon, and that it was just coincidence. They laughed and mocked Rude, saying that, as expected of the infamous Butcher of Miasma, he couldn't even thank people properly. Rude realized the situation wasn't in his favor. So, holding back his anger, he apologized and thanked the 3 adventurers. The scene shifted to Bologna, where Rude's current base was a restaurant called Full Belly. There, some men were attacking him. They said that every time that Butcher of Miasma walked in, he left a horrible smell that ruined the food. One of them said Rude was so dumb he hadn't even noticed that. They also said real adventurers had skills to defeat monsters, and that someone like Rude, with a useless skill like status abnormality nullification, couldn't even be called an adventurer. It was then explained that nullification of status abnormalities was a rare skill, useful only in places like miasma dungeons, as it protected the user from toxic effects and curses. But since it wasn't a combat-oriented skill, Rude was never accepted into any expedition group. Because of that, he ended up rejected and became known as the Butcher of Miasma, someone who explored the deeper floors alone in search of herbs and items. In other words, his useless skill turned him into a renegade adventurer. Lying on his bed, Rude reflected, feeling depressed. He was already an adult, but still fighting for his life against miserable rats in the dungeon. Even knowing that those rats weren't exactly normal, he wondered if he would spend his whole life being just the damned Butcher of Miasma. The scene then changed to the Adventurers Guild. Rude thought about finding a new colony while he still had some money, but upon arriving, he noticed the place was more crowded and noisy than usual. Curious, he approached the receptionist and asked if there was any good quest for him that day. She recognized him immediately as the Butcher of Miasma and said a new dungeon had been discovered. This made Rude excited because he knew that newly discovered dungeons were usually full of treasures and rare items. For him, it was a golden opportunity. He understood why so many people were gathered there. But before he could ask anything else, the receptionist said she needed to talk about the miasma herbs he always sold. She informed him that starting that day, their price would drop significantly. Upon hearing that, Rude panicked and wanted to know why. The woman explained that miasma dungeons had never been popular, and now that everyone was focusing on the new dungeon, the demand for those herbs would vanish. This left Rude even more frustrated. She explained that the new dungeon was located in the Yahello Mountains, but that he didn't have permission to go there. Surprised, he asked why he couldn't. She replied that the minimum requirement to enter was being rank D, while Rude was only rank E. This filled him with rage. He said he really wanted to explore that new dungeon and asked if there was anything he could do to get a spot. The receptionist answered that those were just the rules. Even if he went there, he would only die for nothing. Suddenly, a blonde man appeared and asked if he really wanted to enter the new dungeon that badly. He said that if Rude wanted to, he could join his group as a porter. The scene then shifted to a moving carriage. The group was already on their way to the new dungeon, and Rude was silently accompanying them. The blonde boy commented that it was good they had found Rude, because they were looking for someone to carry supplies, but no one had accepted the job. Rude listened silently and thought that since all the adventurers were busy with the new dungeon, it really would be hard to find a porter. The other two group members commented with disdain that of all possible options, they ended up with the Butcher of Miasma and that there was no one better available. The blonde boy asked them to stop with those provocations. He said that Rude was a veteran adventurer and that it was much better to count on someone experienced than a beginner. Then he introduced himself again, saying his name was Bayer, leader of the group known as the Scarlet Blades. His two companions were named Sasha and Rick, both rank D adventurers. Rude then formally introduced himself, saying he was a rank E adventurer from the region and that he was satisfied to work with them. Before starting the mission, Bayer asked Rude to show his status. He wanted to get a better idea of his abilities, so he asked if he could see his guild card. Rude agreed and showed the card. The system displayed his information, level 7, human race, normal condition, rank E, and all his skills. Bayer was surprised to see that Rude also had fire magic. Rude explained that the power was too weak to be useful in battle, but it was still good for lighting dark places or cooking. Bayer, smiling, said that was already quite useful and said they would count on him for the mission. The group finally arrived at the entrance of the new dungeon. Everyone was excited in front of the massive gate. Bayer explained that this was the newly discovered Yahello dungeon. Sasha, excited, commented that they seemed to be the first ones there. Rick, eager, wanted to start exploring right away. But as soon as they opened the door, everyone was surprised. The dungeon was already crowded. There were adventurers everywhere, some collecting miasma, others fighting monsters, and even groups looting treasures. Sasha, annoyed, complained about seeing so many people there. Bayer concluded that the first floor had already been completely explored. Rick suggested they should go down quickly, as there would probably be fewer adventurers on the lower floors. Sasha agreed, but Rude warned them that since it was a newly discovered dungeon, the ideal approach would be to map the first layer carefully before advancing. Sasha mocked the idea, asking if he really thought he had the right to give opinions. Rick added that it was exactly because of that kind of thinking that he was still just rank E. Bayer then stepped in and told the two to stop with the provocations. He said Rude didn't mean any harm. However, he admitted he agreed with his companions, stating that if they continued at that pace, they wouldn't get good results. That's why they really needed to explore the deeper floors. The group descended to the fourth layer. As soon as they arrived, a wolf attacked them. Rick protected Rude and struck the creature's head. He told him to stop being afraid of such weak monsters. Sasha electrocuted the wolves with her magic, while Bayer cut them in half with his sword. Watching everything, Rude realized how strong they all were, and that he himself could barely move in that dungeon. After a while, they managed to defeat all the wolves. Sasha said they had made the right decision by advancing and that it was great being in an area without other groups. Bayer added that the monsters weren't that strong and that they had found some good treasures. Rick ordered Rude to collect the materials from the monsters he had defeated, but Rude replied that the bodies were too damaged and that the magic stones were probably destroyed along with them. Rick, irritated, said he didn't even know if they were really destroyed and accused Rude of being lazy. Though angry, Rude didn't answer. He just went to the corpses and began working. He stopped in front of a completely torn apart wolf covered in guts and foul-smelling blood and wondered why that guy had to overdo it so much. Thinking about how to deal with the body, he activated his fire magic and considered whether it would be easier to burn part of the corpse. Rick, seeing this, joked by asking if he was really about to cook the monster. He added that after so much time inside, he was also starting to feel hungry, and that those corpses were even starting to look appetizing. Sasha, shocked, called him disgusting and told him to stop. She reminded them that eating monster meat was a taboo among adventurers, because by consuming the flesh, they ended up absorbing the creature's mana, and no one knew exactly what that could cause in the human body. Rick laughed and said he was just joking about eating monster meat. When they got out of there, he planned to use the money they earned to eat a proper meal. However, suddenly, everyone felt a terrifying presence approaching. When they turned around, they saw a giant red-skinned minotaur holding a massive axe. Rude, in shock, wondered why a monster like that, typical of the depths of the Hankby dungeon, was there on such a shallow layer. Sasha, scared, said there was no way they could defeat that creature. The whole group panicked, unsure of what to do. Bayer then turned to Rude and said he would use his items, asking him to hand over his backpack. Then he told Rude to pay close attention to the Minotaur's movements. Confused, Rude asked if he had a plan. Bayer, with a wicked smile, replied that he did. In the next moment, he drew his sword and slashed Rude's back, knocking him to the ground with a treacherous strike. Bayer shouted for Rick to activate his skill, and Rick used Warrior's Encouragement, a technique that makes the target attract all nearby monsters. He enchanted his axe with that ability and threw it beside Rude. Right after, Sasha activated her acceleration skill, which doubled the speed of targets. Rude, lying down and in intense pain, realized what was happening and furiously asked if they had planned to abandon him from the beginning. With a cold expression completely different from the one he had shown before, Bayer replied that there was no other reason for bringing the Butcher of Miasma with them. The group began to flee, shouting for Rude to buy them as much time as possible. Consumed by rage, Rude screamed, betrayed, and humiliated. But there was no time to think. The Minotaur was already preparing an attack. The blow missed by inches, hitting the ground. Rude let out a nervous laugh when he realized he had dodged by instinct, but he knew this was the end of the line for him. The Minotaur then charged and slammed into Rude with a brutal shoulder hit, launching him against the wall. Upon impact, the wall broke and revealed a massive hole behind it. Both Rude and the Minotaur fell together into the abyss. After falling from a ridiculous height, Rude opened his eyes, dazed, and wondered if he was still alive. To his surprise, he realized he had landed on the Minotaur itself, which had cushioned his fall and, ironically, saved his life. However, his arm was completely shattered. He knew he couldn't stay there for long. Even if no more monsters appeared, he would die from blood loss or starvation before having any chance of recovery. The pain and hunger were unbearable. He needed to eat something immediately. He looked at the Minotaur's body. The flesh looked juicy. For a moment, he thought he was going insane for even considering it. Eating a monster was an absolute taboo. He knew this could only end badly. He closed his eyes and thought that his life had been miserable from the very beginning. But then, a memory surfaced in his mind. He remembered being a child when a man told him that no matter how hard life became, he should never give up. With that memory burning in his heart, Rude opened his eyes with a bloodthirsty gaze. He sank his teeth into the Minotaur's flesh and began devouring the monster. The system explained that when a human without magic consumes the flesh of a monster rich in magical energy, magical particles invade the consumer's body. This phenomenon was known as the state of monstrification. It was a more terrifying condition than dying from poison. That is why eating monsters was considered one of the greatest taboos among adventurers. But Rude, facing death, gambled everything on a desperate choice. The Minotaur's meat, besides satisfying his hunger, also triggered an unexpected mutation. His once destroyed arm began to regenerate before his eyes. Something was changing. He stood up and began walking through the dungeon. Several bats watched his every step, but his expression had changed. Now, it looked more like that of a monster than a human. When the bats attacked him, he activated a new skill. It was Roar, a technique that released a sound wave so powerful it intimidated enemies and made them retreat. Rude knocked out some of the bats with his presence alone, making the others flee as if affected by a power similar to Conqueror's Haki. He then activated a new skill called Physical Reinforcement, which temporarily boosted his strength. With the axe he had found, he defeated the bats and began devouring their bodies. By doing this, he acquired a new skill called echolocation, which allowed him to detect creatures nearby and was especially effective in the dark. As soon as he activated this ability, he realized that many monsters were approaching. Hordes were coming his way, and Rude, determined, prepared to face them all. He began eliminating every monster that crossed his path. He felt that the axe fit perfectly in his hand, and with echolocation, he no longer needed magic to detect enemies. As he advanced, he killed the monsters and devoured their flesh, feeling a surge of power flow through his body each time. After defeating several enemies, Rude finally emerged from the dungeon. He threw the axe to the ground, looked up at the sky, and shouted in relief for having survived. The scene then shifted to the Adventurers Guild. The atmosphere was tense. A man, the guildmaster of Bologna named Lancarsi, explained that after hearing the group's report, he had gathered all the adventurers who had been in the dungeon except Rude. Bayer, faking sadness, said that when they encountered the Minotaur on the 4th floor, Rude was killed before they could help him. He said that if they had noticed the monster's presence earlier, they might have saved their companion. Sasha pretended to cry, while Rick also played along with the act. Lankars then declared that he understood the situation and that from that moment on, entry into that dungeon would be forbidden. At that moment, the guild receptionist, who was feeling down, was surprised to see Rude walk through the door. Everyone was shocked. It was him, the Butcher of Miasma, and no one could understand how he had survived. Bayer rushed to hug him, pretending to be overjoyed, but whispered into Rude's ear that if he said anything, he would be killed. The rest of the group began greeting him, asking if he was okay, if he was injured, and claiming they were worried, saying they had tried to go back to save him, but the dungeon had been closed. Bayer, keeping up the act, said that no matter what had happened, Rude's survival deserved a celebration, even if it couldn't happen there. However, as he got closer to Rude, he noticed that Rude could barely move. Then Rude declared in front of everyone that he had been used as bait, leaving everyone stunned. Bayer, pretending to be shocked, asked what he meant by that. Lancarsi questioned Rude about what he was talking about, and Rude explained that Bayer had stolen his supplies and attacked him from behind. He said that Rick had used his skill to lure the Minotaur toward him, and that Sasha had used her speed ability to help the group escape. Bayer, desperate, tried to deny it, but Lancarse said that the truth could be clarified by a woman he had brought with him. At that moment, a woman entered the hall, leaving everyone nervous. She was an officer of truth, a rare figure who almost never left the capital. Sasha, panicked, asked why she was there, and Lancarse replied that due to the high number of deaths among the group's porters, he had requested help from an old friend. He then asked the officer of truth, between Bayer's group and Rude, who was telling the truth. The woman stated that the members of the Scarlet Blade were lying. Wellington raised his staff and confirmed that Rude was telling the truth, shocking all the adventurers present. Bayer, furious, asked how she could know that, and Lancarse explained that the officer's ability was truth. He said that this ability could not be acquired after reaching adulthood, and its precision rivaled that of unique skills. He added that lies could not get past her ability, and that there was nothing more reliable than the words of someone who had dedicated all their power to the nation. In the end, Lancarse declared that abandoning a companion was a taboo among adventurers, and Bayer's group group not only abandoned Rude but also injured him and used him as bait. Even without investigating their other crimes, that alone was enough to revoke their adventurer licenses, reducing them to slaves. Sasha and Rick panicked, refusing to accept what they had just heard. Bayer, furious at being exposed, said it was inconceivable for someone like him to be reduced to a slave. He claimed that if it weren't for the Officer of Truth, no one would have discovered his plan. Consumed by rage, he tried to attack the officer, but Rude quickly stepped in front of her, protecting her. He firmly said Bayer should not dare touch her. Then, he punched Bayer in the face, sending him flying, which left everyone there stunned by Rude's strength. Soon after, the scene shifted to the Adventurers Guild reception room. Lancarse apologized to Rude for bothering him, saying he was probably very tired. Rude replied that it was all right. Lancarse then informed him that the 3 adventurers involved in the betrayal had been captured by his team and would be interrogated. If it was confirmed they were repeat offenders accustomed to using porters as bait, all members of the Scarlet Blade would lose their possessions and their status as adventurers, being reduced to rescos. However, since Bayer had gone so far as to attempt to kill an Officer of Truth, it was likely he would never be seen again. Lancarse returned to the subject of the dungeon and explained that the traders had lost any claim to the profits earned there. He reported that around 200,000 region had accumulated inside and asked Rude to accept that amount as a reward. Rude left the room with the money in hand and, overjoyed, hugged the sack. He thought that amount would cover his expenses for a long time, and that it would have taken much longer to gather that much just by collecting miasma grass every day. He was surprised to realize how much money could be earned simply by being an adventurer. He also noticed that people had stopped insulting him, probably because of what they had seen earlier, but he knew that did not mean they would be kind to him. And he thought that if he kept standing out like this, they might start to suspect his sudden growth. He decided he would continue trying his luck in the miasma dungeon as before. He was ready to leave negativity behind. Now that he had money, he could buy better equipment and eat whatever he wanted. He considered visiting the tool shop first, but a specific bag caught his attention. He also thought about getting something to eat. The next day, Rude returned to the miasma dungeon. This time, he managed to defeat the rats easily. He found it amazing to think that if it had been the day before, he would have been running from those 5 rats. He activated his analysis skill and viewed all the status information of one of the miasma rats. He mentally noted that this was the skill he had obtained from devouring a strange monster and that it could even be used on corpses. He discovered the rats were level 9 and began to wonder how much his own stats had increased. Since he had defeated them easily, he assumed he was around level 20. However, when he opened his status screen, he was surprised to see he was already level 42. All his attributes had increased drastically, which amazed him since the day before he had still been in rank S. It was something extremely rare. He decided to check the abilities he had acquired. When he opened his inventory, he found a true arsenal. There were so many that he couldn't even count them. He then remembered the place where he had previously fallen in the dungeon. The wall that had broken was now sealed, and so the new dungeon would remain inaccessible for a while. That day, Rude had only planned a light exploration in the miasma dungeon, but upon seeing so many new abilities, he became excited to test them. He wanted to see how effective they would be on the deeper floors. He was also curious to use the new bag he had bought. He thought he wanted to find an ideal monster for his first real trial. The scene showed Rude advancing through the floors, killing several monsters. He passed through the 6th, 9th, and even the 13th floor. However, he still found the monsters too weak. He felt he needed to go deeper to find prey that was truly worthy. Eventually, he reached the 24th floor. There, he encountered a creature wielding a giant knife. He used his analysis skill and discovered that the enemy was a level 25 lizard soldier with skills in one-handed swordsmanship, shield techniques, and miasma resistance. He thought that they normally fought in groups, but at that moment there was only one. He figured it might be possible to fight it alone. He drew his sword and charged. The lizard noticed his presence and blocked with its arm. Rude assessed that it was not just any enemy, but reassured himself that he would not miss his next strike. Suddenly, the lizard began to run, which confused Rude as he didn't understand why it was fleeing. He chased the creature until it reached a dead end. Rude approached with his sword in hand, confident that the enemy had no way to escape, but at that moment, the lizard's expression changed. Now, it looked like the predator, not the prey. Rude realized too late that he had walked into a trap. Two other lizard soldiers appeared behind him, surrounding him. Even with his current high level, the situation was becoming critical. The soldiers began attacking him. Rude knew he had to defeat at least one of those enemies if he wanted to advance. So, he chose to strike first. When he lunged at one of them, the lizard was able to block his sword. Even so, Rude remained determined and decided to end it quickly. Just as he was about to finish the enemy, another lizard appeared in front with a shield, protecting its companion. Immediately after, a third one attacked Rude from behind. He smiled as he barely dodged and started wondering how many more would appear. Rude noticed that the enemies were working together in a very coordinated way, using advanced ambush tactics. While thinking about this, he heard a sharp sound in the distance and then saw a lizard different from the others. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was the Lizard General, level 32. Its skills included one-handed swordsmanship, shield techniques, miasma resistance, and command. Rude smiled, realizing he had finally found the leader. The general began shouting and all the lizard soldiers charged at Rude at once. He quickly activated his physical reinforcement skill and struck multiple enemies simultaneously. Using the head of one as a springboard, he leaped directly toward the general, landing a solid hit. However, to his surprise, the attack had no effect at all. The general tried to counterattack, and Rude realized he would not have time to dodge. So he activated his iron body skill to withstand the blow. He thought he was not the only one with a trick up his sleeve, and activated his analysis skill again, trying to understand what was going on. He had definitely felt the impact of the previous blow, but had been unable to injure the general. That was strange, since the general had no reinforcement or resistance abilities. Suspicious, Rude began analyzing the other lizards, and noticed that one of them had a massive wound on his chest. When he checked its skills, he discovered it had the substitution ability. That explained everything. It was that lizard that was taking the damage in the general's place. Without wasting any time, Rude rushed at him and killed him instantly. He commented to himself that it must be tough being a subordinate whose only purpose was to take hits, but told the fallen body not to take it personally. The general roared furiously, and all the other lizards charged at Rude once more. However, he activated his web manipulation skill and trapped them all at once. He said that the fact they were all gathered together just made things easier. After that, he walked over to the general and declared that this time he was the winner. Without hesitation, he cut off the lizard general's head and ended the battle. With victory secured, Rude said it was finally time to eat. He grabbed the magic pouch he had bought with the money from the guild. That bag had an internally expanded space through magic and weighed nothing when closed. Inside, Rude had stored cooking utensils and some spices. When he had fallen into that hidden floor, he had been desperate to survive, but he had always wanted to try this kind of food. He began slicing the lizard meat and soon placed it on a skillet to fry. He was curious to know whether monster meat, once cooked and seasoned, would taste good. Mouth-watering, he tasted the meat and discovered it was far more delicious than he expected. He was impressed by how tasty it was and told himself he could get addicted to that flavor. After eating, Rude gained new abilities: one-handed swordsmanship, shield techniques, miasma resistance, and command. However, he remained intrigued by why the meat tasted so good. He wondered if it had something to do with the magical particles inside monsters. He recalled that the skills from the Minotaur, the spider armor, and the evil eye had been very useful to him, but there were still other monster abilities he had not tested yet, such as those from the lightning wolf and the black serpent. After the meal, Rude decided to keep exploring. On the 21st floor, he encountered some bees and frogs. He used his lightning cloak and began electrocuting all the monsters. Once finished, he commented that the ability was really useful. He noticed that the monsters on that floor seemed specialized in causing abnormal status effects, but they had chosen the wrong opponent. He then declared it was time to try frog meat with bugs. He breaded everything for cooking and said that poisonous frogs had tender meat with a taste similar to mushrooms. That made him wish for a beer to go along, though unfortunately he had none at the moment. After defeating the previous enemies, Rude acquired new skills: poison, temperature variation, powder scale, paralyzing powder scale, and air slash. However, right after that, he heard a noise coming from deep within the dungeon. It was a loud sound that resembled a collision, followed by human voices. He was surprised to realize that other adventurers had made it this far. He mentally gave thanks for the food, stored everything in his magic pouch, and thought it was very rare to find other groups in combat at that location. He considered himself lucky and thought he might be able to get some useful information from them. Meanwhile, the scene showed a group fighting against a hooded figure. One of the men complained about the strength of the woman's strikes and said he hadn't expected her to still have so much mana left. Another commented that the effort to capture her would be worth it. Then they removed the woman's hood, revealing she was an elf. One of the men wondered how much she would be worth on the black market. At that moment, Rude appeared, saying he had hoped to find friendly adventurers. He said he didn't know exactly what was going on, but he couldn't just stand by while a woman was being beaten like that. The man with a scar over his eye asked who he was, and Rude, smiling, replied that he was just an adventurer, though of a lower rank. The elf, worried, warned him to run away as fast as possible because those men were adventurer hunters. Rude activated his analysis skill and realized he had heard of them before as high-level adventurers. However, when he tried to analyze the man with the scar, he couldn't see his status. The only visible detail was level 65. The others were level 52, 56, and 58. Rude suspected they were using concealment skills or some kind of magical item. The highest level man ordered his underlings to attack Rude. He was surprised by the speed of one of the enemies, but managed to defend himself with his sword. The blonde man praised his defense, but Rude mockingly said that was nothing, since he himself was weak. The enemy, angered by the mockery, charged at him again. Rude then activated his poison skill and spat directly into the enemy's face, who fell to the ground screaming in pain as his face was corroded. The man, agonizing, said Rude looked like a monster. Rude himself admitted that this way of fighting was ugly and unfit for an adventurer, but it was the only way someone like him could survive. The scarred man realized that attack came from a unique poison skill and concluded that Rude could no longer be underestimated. He therefore ordered all three to attack at once. They charged in with full force, and Rude thought that if he paused for even a second, he would be killed. He was caught off guard and almost took a kick to the face, but activated his Iron Body skill at the last moment. Even so, he was thrown into a river of miasma. The man with the scar found it strange that Rude had withstood the attack and thought that kick should have broken his neck. Another man approached, saying he would kill Rude once and for all, but before he could, Rude began swimming deeper into the water. One of the enemies tried to follow but was stopped by the scarred man, who warned him that it was a poisonous swamp and there was no guarantee he would make it out alive. He said that not even Rude could endure the poison for long and that he would probably resurface soon. Time passed and Rude was still underwater. He wondered how long the enemies planned to wait for him. He decided it was time to fight like a true adventurer. He thought that, luckily, he had fallen into that poisonous swamp, where in addition to the constant miasma, the surrounding vapor quickly drained his opponent's stamina. The men outside began to grow uneasy. One of them said that more than 10 minutes had passed and his head was starting to ache. Still hidden, Rude thought that this was the right moment. He wanted to face them for longer, but he knew that if he waited any more, the elf would suffer even more, as she was already wounded and weak. So he emerged from the swamp water and said that the effects of the poison in miasma must have been cruel to them. The men said that he had finally given up and that he had been causing too much trouble. Rude, however, explained that, unfortunately for them, he was immune to abnormal conditions. That was why he couldn't even understand how much they were suffering at that moment. The scarred man quickly realized that Rude possessed the abnormal status nullification ability. With that, he understood he had been tricked and immediately ordered his companions to attack. They rushed at Rude, but the swamp's poison began to gradually drain their stamina, while the accumulated miasma reduced their stats. One of the enemies tried to strike Rude from behind, but he activated his Iron Body skill again and resisted the blow. Then he used his lightning cloak and electrocuted both opponents at once. After frying them, one of them cursed Rude angrily, but Rude didn't hesitate and activated his new skill, Air Slash, finishing both of them off with a precise strike. The scarred man was stunned to see that Rude wielded abilities like poison, iron body, lightning cloak, and now air slash. He wondered how a human could have so many skills that were typically associated with monsters. Rude, however, said that none of that mattered. The man thought that normally he would have the upper hand in physical combat against any human, but the miasma in the area was weakening him. Even so, he activated his agility boost and charged at Rude. However, Rude responded with a physical reinforcement and, with a powerful blow, shattered the enemy's sword and cut him in half as if it were nothing. He commented that, if not for the abnormal status effects, that man would have been much stronger. The scene then shifted to the elf, who thanked him for saving her. She said she didn't know what would have happened if it weren't for him. Rude replied that he couldn't leave her in such a miserable situation. Even while trying to remain composed, Rude noticed that her body was still heavily affected by the miasma. He did his best to provide first aid, but he thought it was really rare to find an elf in such a remote region. He wondered what could have led her to be hunted by adventurer hunters. Suddenly, they both heard a sound from ahead. A huge monster appeared. Rude quickly realized it was the Moth Leader, a level 37 enemy with multiple poison-related abilities. He concluded that despite its size, the moth was no match for him and wouldn't be able to intimidate him. The moth then launched a wind slash ability that almost hit the elf. Rude asked if she was alright, and upon hearing that she was, said he had been startled and would now return the favor. He looked at the moth and commented that flying wouldn't keep it safe. He then activated his air slash skill and launched several attacks that sliced through the moth's body. However, he counterattacked by releasing paralyzing scales in his direction. Rude smiled because he knew he was immune to paralysis, but at that moment he remembered the elf was also there. Before he could act, she herself used her staff to unleash a powerful wind spell, surprising Rude. He thought that was exactly what you'd expect from an elf. And then he finished the moth off with a direct strike to the head. After the battle, the elf asked if Rude was immune to poison and paralysis, and commented that his abilities really did resemble those of monsters. Rude was unsure how to explain, but before he could say anything, the elf fell to her knees. He asked if she had been hit by the scales, but she said that wasn't the reason. She said there was another explanation and promised to tell him everything once they were out of there. The scene changed again. Rude and the elf had managed to leave the dungeon and were sitting near a tree. She breathed a sigh of relief and said she felt much better outside the labyrinth. Before explaining what had happened, she decided to introduce herself. She said her name was Alicia and that she was a former adventurer. Rude was surprised and asked if she was Alicia of the Emerald Storms. Laughing, she said yes and asked if he had heard of her. Rude confirmed, saying of course he had. She was part of the most renowned S-rank party in the kingdom of Ludius, the Azuri Trails, and everyone knew the members of that legendary group. But as far as he remembered, the Azuri Trails had been wiped out. Alicia confirmed that with sadness. She said it had already been 5 years and that they were all defeated by monsters. On that day, they had challenged a creature waiting for them in the depths of a dungeon known as the Abyss. During their conversation, Alicia recounted what happened in the battle against the monster in the Abyss dungeon. Her group lost its leader that day. Another member was so gravely wounded that he had to retire, and a third was completely devoured by the labyrinth. She herself did not escape unharmed. On her chest was a clear mark, showing that she too had suffered in that confrontation. Rude, embarrassed, asked what that mark was. Alicia explained it was the result of a curse she received that day. She said that, although it was a low-level curse, she had never heard of anything like it before. Rude also said he had never heard of a weak curse that could not be broken. Alicia replied that she had tried every method possible, but the most she had managed was to slow its progression. She said that the adventurer hunters found out about it and tried to exploit her for profit. In the end, her fate was to die once her level reached 0. Even so, she said she couldn't accept the idea of surrendering to those men. As he listened, Rude thought of a possibility. He opened his status card and looked at his substitution skill, which allowed him to select a target and absorb both their attacks and negative status effects. He then said he wanted to test something and asked if she could receive the skill he was about to activate. Alicia, a little confused, agreed. Rude then placed his hand on her shoulder and activated substitution. He felt the curse disappearing from her body and transferring to his. Alicia, alarmed, begged him to stop immediately, saying he would be cursed. But Rude, smiling, assured her that it was fine and that she should trust him. The curse completely passed to him. Right after that, Rude activated his unique ability, Abnormal Status Nullification, and with that, he managed to break the curse entirely. Looking at his hand, he realized it had worked. Alicia, still in shock, could not understand what had just happened. Rude asked her to check her guild card. As soon as she opened it, she saw that her status had returned to normal. She could hardly believe the curse had been broken. Rude explained that this was his unique skill, and that he had imagined he could nullify a curse if he absorbed it. He said he was happy it had worked, because in truth he had not been sure it would. Alicia, emotional, called Rude an idiot for risking so much for someone he didn't even know. Even so, she thanked him deeply. He simply comforted her, placing a hand on her shoulder. The scene shifted to a bar. Alicia was cheerful, drinking with joy. She said the food was cheap, the beer was delicious, and that Rude really knew good places. While she talked excitedly, Rude, a bit embarrassed, simply gave her a thumbs up in approval. He thought the place really was nice, at least until they got kicked out. He then asked if she was okay drinking so much, considering that just a few hours earlier she had been seriously injured. Alicia, smiling, replied that she was ready for more. She said that on such a good day, there was no reason not to celebrate. The two made a toast, and then Rude asked what she planned to do from then on. Alicia said that, before anything else, she wanted to get to know him better. With a gentle expression, she asked why he had decided to become an adventurer. Rude explained that a long time ago, the village where he lived had been attacked by monsters. These monsters killed his family, his friends, and destroyed everything he had. However, thanks to an S-rank adventurer, he survived. A scene showed that adventurer saving young Rude from a group of monsters. Rude said he would never forget that image. Since then, he had dreamed of becoming an S-rank adventurer too, so he could help others. That was his greatest goal. Alicia smiled and said he had a noble objective. Rude asked if she didn't think that was ridiculous, but Alicia replied that she had also dreamed of reaching S-rank. She said she always wanted to become stronger and stronger until she was cursed. Even so, she was sure that some of her former companions were still alive, trapped deep in the dungeon known as the Abyss. That's why, no matter what happened, she intended to challenge that monster again. But for now, they both knew they needed to become stronger, each to achieve their own goal. After everything they had gone through together, Alicia looked at Rude and asked if he would like to form a party with her. Rude was a little confused by the request, unsure how to respond. However, before he could think clearly, the same men who had mocked Rude earlier appeared again. One of them grabbed Alicia's arm and mocked, saying Rude was drinking with a beautiful woman. They again called him by the offensive nickname Miasma Butcher. Rude immediately recognized who they were. The men told Alicia to stop drinking with someone disgusting like him and invited her to drink with them instead. Rude then stood up and demanded they let go of Alicia. Irritated, the men prepared to retaliate, but Alicia stepped in and told them to stop. She said they were in a tavern, and if they wanted to compete, there was a better way. The scene then changed, showing the three of them sitting at a table for a drinking contest. Alicia proposed that the winner would be the one who could drink the most. The competition began, and the three started drinking non-stop while the crowd around them cheered and celebrated. After a while, the two men were completely passed out, while Alicia remained steady and smiling. She was the clear winner of that contest, and Rude gave a thumbs up once again in approval. Rude commented that she did really well, especially considering she had already been drunk before the contest started. Alicia, now completely drunk, smiled and said he was her savior. She said she hadn't fallen so low as to sit and watch while people mocked the man who had saved her. But before she could finish speaking, she collapsed onto Rude's lap. He sighed and said he had no choice. Then, he activated his substitution ability once more, transferring the drunkenness to himself. Immediately, Alicia woke up. Rude explained that he had taken the drunkenness from her, since he couldn't get drunk. Alicia, impressed, commented that first he had lifted her curse, and now even her drunkenness. She said she had never seen such an incredible skill, and, more than ever, wanted to form a party with him. But if anyone thought she would stop drinking, they were completely wrong. The first thing Alicia did was go straight to the counter to drink more. She stopped in front of a silver plaque where the name of a special dish was written. She said it was a shame she couldn't try that dish. The bartender explained that monsters had taken over the fishing fields of Barnamos, and that he had already sent a request to a guild. However, all the high-level adventurers were busy. He then asked if Rude and Alicia could accept the mission. The scene shifted to the fishing fields. Rude and Alicia were in a boat sailing to the waters of Barnamos. Alicia, excited, said they were at the fishing field and would defeat the monsters quickly so they could try the special dish. But suddenly, a monster emerged from the water and attacked. Rude, smiling, said they had finally found the creature the restaurant owner had spoken of. However, Alicia asked him to look more closely. From above, they could see several monsters surrounding the boat. Rude activated his analysis ability and identified that all of them were level 23, with skills like high-speed swimming, water bullets, and long-range attack accuracy like snipers. The monsters began firing water bullets at him, and Rude realized there was no way to dodge them in the tight space of the boat. With no other choice, he jumped into the water. Immediately, all the fish monsters turned on him, but Rude activated his lightning cloak, electrocuting everything around him. Alicia, watching from the boat, was impressed by how quickly he handled the situation. However, Rude commented that there were still more monsters, and was intrigued that they weren't counterattacking. He wondered whether they were being cautious or trying to protect something, so he decided to investigate. He asked Alicia for a favor, tied a rope around his waist, and dove to the bottom of the sea. Down there, Rude confirmed his suspicions. The monsters weren't fleeing, but they also weren't attacking. They seemed to be protecting something hidden in the depths of that place. Rude was at the bottom of the sea when he spotted a giant creature. Upon analyzing it carefully, he saw that it was a level 38 monster. Its abilities included paralysis, poison, autonomy, poison resistance, and accelerated healing. He thought it looked like a sea anemone, but quickly realized it resembled more of a giant hermit crab. Suddenly, a fish monster emerged from one of the creature's tentacles, revealing that this was how it generated the fish. Rude understood that continuing to fight the fish would be useless as long as the real enemy remained untouched. Since the crab showed no sign of a direct attack, he decided to get ready. However, he was soon caught off guard. Fish clung to his legs and began attacking him. That was when he realized the monsters were only distracting him, so he wouldn't notice the movements of the tentacles. Using his lightning cloak ability, Rude electrocuted everything around him, believing the crab would also be affected since it was in direct contact. Observing the tentacles, he noticed they were no longer connected to the creature's body. He then remembered the monster's autonomy skill. As soon as it felt the electric shock, the crab had severed its own tentacles to avoid further damage. At that moment, the crab charged at him. Since Rude had been underwater for a long time, he was starting to run out of air. He pulled the emergency rope, trusting that Alicia would rescue him. Using her wind magic, she quickly pulled him back to the surface. Out of the water, she asked if he was all right. Rude thanked her for saving his life and explained that there was a boss down there that kept producing fish and had an accelerated healing ability. That's why he needed to go back down as soon as possible. Alicia commented that the monsters had a huge advantage underwater and that her magic couldn't reach them there. She then asked if Rude had a plan. He said there was only one way and that he needed to decide quickly. Since she had trusted him enough to reveal her curse and even asked to form a party together, he felt he also needed to share his secret with her before she made her own choice. He picked up one of the dead fish and asked her not to tell anyone because he was about to show her something important. The scene then cut to Rude already back at the bottom of the sea, now with a new ability called high-speed swimming. With it, he quickly began killing all the monster fish in his path. The boss tried to trap him with its tentacles again, but this time he dodged easily and went straight toward the crab. With his sword, he delivered a precise strike and, at the same moment, activated his lightning cloak to finish off the enemy. He thought that with this, the fishing spot would finally return to peace. However, his biggest concern now was Alicia. Rude began to wonder what she might be feeling after seeing him devour monsters. He kept thinking about what she would say when he returned. But when he surfaced, he realized Alicia was no longer there. He started to smile, thinking he had been foolish to believe she would wait for him. But suddenly, he heard her voice saying he had taken too long. She was holding some sticks in her hands and said she was glad to see he was unharmed, asking if he had managed to defeat the boss. Rude confirmed and she thanked God. Alicia explained that she couldn't just sit there waiting, so she decided to collect wood to build a fire to help dry his clothes. Surprised, Rude asked if she was really okay after what she had seen. She replied that at first she had been a little shocked, but the fact that he trusted her enough to reveal his secret made her happier than anything else. He thanked her for staying, but said he still wanted to absorb the boss's abilities. So he cut off a piece of it and brought it with him, though he thought it would be strange to eat it in front of her. Instead, he caught some regular fish for her, including a barnama, and said that even though it might be odd to eat next to a monster, she didn't seem to mind it at all. Alicia, excited, said she would definitely eat it. At sunset, while they were eating together, Rude said he would use the moment to tell her about the first time he ate a monster. Later that night, Alicia was eating enthusiastically and praised the taste of the food. Even so, she was still surprised that Rude consumed monster meat and asked if that was the reason he had eaten his first one. Rude replied that it was exactly that which had allowed a weak E rank like him to get closer to his dream. Alicia then said she finally understood. He had used that power to save her from the adventurer hunters and the curse she suffered. And in fact, when monsters were well prepared, they ended up tasting quite good. Rude had made grenade fillets with sautéed tentacles and, smiling, commented that monsters were surprisingly delicious. He said that, even though he didn't need to eat grenades anymore, he still wanted to cook them anyway, and asked if Alicia wanted to try. She replied that because of the possible symptoms, she wasn't sure she would survive it, so she would pass this time. But right after, she said she wanted to ask again if Rude would join her party. Rude got serious and asked if she really didn't know anyone stronger than him for that. Alicia then explained that it had already been 5 years since she was cursed, and even though she survived the labyrinth, most of the human adventurers she knew were now retired. She said many frontline adventurers were a bit unhinged, and no matter how powerful they were, you couldn't trust them to watch your back. She stated that she wanted someone she could completely trust to adventure alongside, and if it was Rude, she believed that was possible. Rude then smiled and accepted her invitation to form a party. The scene shifted to the Adventurers Guild and the Bologna division. Alicia was excited, saying they would prepare for their first job together. Rude commented that he doubted they would get a good mission, since he was only E rank. She admitted that he was right, but said she already knew exactly what she wanted. They approached the counter, and Alicia told the receptionist they were forming a party from that day forward. She asked for them to be registered. When the receptionist saw Alicia's adventurer card, she was completely shocked to realize she was in front of an S-rank adventurer known as Alicia of the Emerald Storm. Her unique ability was spirit magic, in addition to thousands of other techniques she had mastered. Surprised, the receptionist asked why someone so powerful would form a party with the Miasma Butcher. Alicia didn't like that nickname for Rude, and the receptionist, embarrassed, got the message. Alicia then said she wanted to increase Rude's rank and asked what the requirements were. The receptionist checked the documents and informed them that he already had enough achievements, lacking only victories in more challenging battles. Alicia requested the most difficult subjugation mission available so they could complete it together. The receptionist agreed and gave them a mission to eliminate a pack of gray wolves. The scene shifted to the outskirts of Boulogne, where Rude was already in action. Using his stealth skill, he began taking down the wolves one by one. However, one of the wolves howled loudly, summoning reinforcements. Rude warned Alicia that more were coming, and that they were her responsibility. She responded quickly by activating her spirit magic and summoning the spirit Sylphide. She asked for the spirit's help, and Rude, seeing it, was impressed. He thought that must be Alicia's unique ability, spirit magic. She used a move called Cutting Gale, launching a powerful wind attack that sliced several wolves in half with ease. Rude realized she had tremendous power and thought it would be impossible to dodge something like that. Alicia commented that she believed her true strength was still being suppressed by the curse. Rude was shocked, unable to imagine how powerful she would be without it. As he thought about this, more wolves attacked him from behind. Surprised that so many were still hiding, he realized he couldn't block in time. At that moment, Alicia called for Sylphide again, and Rude vanished from the wolves' sight. When they looked up, the two of them were flying. Rude smiled, thankful that she had saved him again. But Alicia told him to thank Sylphide instead. Still, Alicia warned that they couldn't relax yet. She had seen at least 5 wolves watching them from the bushes, and there were probably many more. Rude said it was time for him to act, and activated his echolocation. With it, he detected about 30 enemies nearby, including the ones already defeated. The mission could end with one more coordinated attack. Rude asked Alicia to strike the location he would point out. She positioned herself and prepared her attack. Rude thought that, although echolocation was less accurate in open areas, and Alicia couldn't aim at multiple targets at once, if they attacked in a circle, they could gather all the gray wolves in one spot. Alicia then said she had done her part and that the rest was up to Rude. At that moment, he appeared in the middle of the wolves with glowing red eyes and activated his paralyzing breath skill, which made all the wolves fall to the ground at once. The scene shifted again, and the sun was already setting. In total, Rude had eliminated 52 wolves that day. He commented that he couldn't believe they had found so many monsters in such a short time. Alicia replied that maybe the wolf population really had increased on a large scale. Taking the opportunity, Rude asked about the spirit magic she used earlier. Alicia explained that she could use spirit magic, which connected her to entities of nature. She formally introduced Sylphide to Rude and said that even though spirits are invisible, they are usually everywhere. She explained that to use their power, you have to offer your own mana as compensation. Even with this cost, it was still possible to cast powerful spells with little energy. She added that, as he saw earlier, you could even float using this kind of magic. Rude was surprised and said he had never heard of wind magic that strong. At that moment, Sylphide started pulling his hair, and Alicia, laughing, explained that she loved causing trouble. The more he complained, the more she enjoyed it. Alicia then said that night was approaching and they should return quickly. This time, they would fly back. While flying, Rude was clearly enjoying himself and praised the experience, saying it was amazing. He asked Alicia what other kinds of magic she could use. She replied that she specialized in water, ice, light, and earth magic, but didn't have much affinity with darkness or fire spirits. She explained that if a spirit didn't have good compatibility with the user, it would require a huge amount of mana, or might not even let its powers be used, which made it clear that Sylphide really liked Rude. He asked if that was true since Sylphide was pulling his ear. Alicia, still laughing, confirmed it, but suddenly Rude saw a village in flames and called out to Alicia. As they approached, they saw fire everywhere and the huge monster in the middle of the destruction. People were running in panic while two adventurers tried to face the creature, completely overwhelmed by fear. They questioned whether gray wolves were really the only monsters in the area and what that terrible thing was doing there. The monster was a Baphomet. The Baphomet raised its hand, invoked a summoning symbol, and launched a massive fire spear at the adventurers. At the last second, Rude appeared and protected them with his water bullet skill. Alicia approached and asked if they were all right. After hearing yes, she said she would personally deal with the monster and asked them to explain the situation quickly. Meanwhile, Rude analyzed the Baphomet's skills. It had fire magic principles, echolocation, mana recovery boost, earth magic principles, and mental reinforcement. Even though it was lower in level than the Lizard General, its stats were on a completely different level. Rude realized this was no ordinary monster. The Baphomet then summoned 4 fire spears. Rude noted that his own fire magic was still too weak for direct combat, but if he could devour this monster, he might finally gain access to powerful fire magic for battle. That thought excited him. He tried to attack, but the Baphomet blocked with its iron claw. Rude then decided to try brute force, but the enemy quickly countered, launching more fire spears at close range. Rude barely managed to escape. Alicia asked if he was okay, and he said yes. In his mind, Rude realized the Baphomet had launched 2 spears and kept 2 in reserve, likely for defense. He understood this would be a very tough opponent. Alicia noted that the monster had raised its guard and said they should exchange information while they still could. She mentioned that the villagers had not been fully evacuated yet, but help had already been requested from the people they met earlier. Still, she wanted to avoid collateral damage to the village, so using a large-scale spell to defeat the enemy all at once wasn't an option. Rude thought that Alicia was probably low on mana after the previous battle and the flight to that location. Because of that, they couldn't rely on Sylphide's magic at the moment. He understood that he needed to act quickly. However, Alicia asked him to trust her and leave it to her. Rude realized that no matter what happened, he had to keep moving forward. He charged at the Baphomet again, even as the monster hurled flames at him. Alicia stayed behind, covering Rude with water magic, and he noticed that she was canceling the enemy's attacks with an opposing spell of equal strength. At that moment, the Baphomet summoned several boulders and launched them toward Rude, but Alicia told him to keep advancing. Rude used his sword to slice the rocks in half, and commented that they were now just debris of the same mass, since Alicia was conserving magic and controlling the side effects precisely. It was an impressive display of mana control, typical of someone who had once been a rank S adventurer. Shortly after, Rude jumped, activated his physical boost, and managed to sever the Baphomet's fingers. When the monster tried to strike back with the other hand, Alicia fired a blast of flame straight into its mouth. After hitting it, she remarked how it must feel to taste its own power. From the other side of the fire, the villagers and the two adventurers who had helped with the evacuation were watching. One of them mentioned the earlier explosion and terrifying scream, wondering if the adventurers had really defeated the monster. The other, still injured, regretted not being able to stay and help. At that moment, Alicia arrived and thanked them for helping with the evacuation. The red-haired adventurer asked if she was okay, and Alicia said yes. She explained that the Baphomet had been seriously wounded but was still alive and could attack again. Because of that, they needed to go after it immediately. Then she made a request to the adventurers. She asked if they had any food to spare, as she was so hungry she was feeling dizzy. The scene changed to the forest surrounding the village, where Rude was with the Baphomet's body. He appeared and said he had returned. Rude asked how the villagers were doing, and he replied that thanks to the adventurers, it seemed they had all been evacuated. He also said that he told the villagers they were going after the Baphomet, so no one would question the body disappearing. Rude apologized, but he said it was fine. Soon after, Rude commented that the Baphomet meat looked delicious. He made a soup using the meat and said it only needed a bit of Artemis and ginger. After seasoning, he tasted the soup and said the flavor was strong, like goat meat, but very tasty. Thanks to this, Rude acquired new skills: fire magic principles, earth magic principles, mental reinforcement, iron claws, and increased mana recovery speed. Even though he found it delicious, someone commented that watching a person eat a humanoid monster was just too weird. Rude thought they were right, and was a bit scared that he was already used to it. At that moment, some pig-like monsters appeared. Rude complained there were too many monsters in that place and decided it was time to try his new combat magic. But when he attempted to cast fire, nothing happened. The pigs activated their quick-step ability and charged at Rude, knocking the entire soup to the ground. Alicia said she had thought he would be able to use the magic, but since she was low on energy, she couldn't help much in that fight. Rude, frustrated, said that was unforgivable. He had cleaned and drained the blood, removed all impurities, and just when it was finally time to eat, the pigs had ruined everything. Angry, he said he had seasoned that meat carefully and wanted to enjoy it. Now, the pigs would become his new meal. Just as Rude was about to fight, Alicia grabbed him and told him to calm down. She explained that the pigs' quick-step ability boosted their acceleration, making their attacks far more dangerous. Even with the upper hand, it would be better to fight from a distance to avoid the reach of that skill. In other words, they needed to retreat immediately. They ran and hid in the treetops. Alicia said it looked like they had managed to lose the monsters. Then she brought up the fire magic Rude had failed to cast earlier. Rude replied that he had never had trouble activating acquired abilities until now. Alicia suggested he use his analysis skill. When he did, he saw that both fire and earth principles were present, but the system said he needed to understand them instinctively. Rude realized that if he still couldn't use the magic, it could only mean one thing: his brain was too limited to grasp the spells. Though he thought that was a bit cruel, he commented on it to Alicia, who replied that even so, he could still use fire magic, even if very weak. That meant the problem wasn't only the spell's strength. She explained that to use monster-derived magic, he might need to learn to control his own mana. Rude then understood that it wasn't enough to simply have magic, he also had to know how to manipulate it. Alicia said she wasn't a mana expert, but it might be similar to how he absorbed monster skills. Rude decided to give it a try. He stretched out his hand and focused, recalling the first time he ate minotaur meat. At that moment, he felt a burst of power in his body, as if he could now release that strength. With eyes wide open, Rude finally managed to use fire magic. He felt that as long as he could sense the mana in his body, he could control it as an extension of himself. Then, he launched flames at the pigs. Right after, the spirits of the pigs ascended into the sky, and Rude was already preparing their meat for cooking. He apologized to Alicia for making her wait, but she said it was fine since she understood it was something he needed to do. Even with a slightly irritated expression, she explained that to use magic skills, you had to manipulate mana, not just cast spells. Since he still had mana even after the earlier battle, he could probably continue using it, Rude commented that when he felt the mana spread through his body, he immediately understood how to use the skill. He thought that if mana could replace magical power, maybe it could be used to strengthen his own body and weapons. Many adventurers do that, refining their magic skills and using that power in close combat. When they circulate mana through their bodies, their physical abilities increase. If they channel it into their weapons at the same time, their attacks become even stronger, making it possible to unleash magical slashes. Alicia then realized that he did not have much magic before, which was why he couldn't use any abilities. Rude confirmed this and said that now he had much more mana than magic. The most important part was that he could replenish that mana by eating monsters. By doing so, he had acquired the quick step ability. Alicia thought that, in other words, he could absorb mana through food and store it in his body. But to her, the most important thing at that moment was that the pork ribs looked incredibly delicious. When Rude saw Alicia drooling, he asked if she wanted to eat too. Embarrassed, she replied that she didn't. Suddenly, they heard a loud noise and wondered what it could be. A giant boar appeared before them. Rude assumed it was probably the boss of those pigs. The monster was absurdly fast, and, in an instant, was already right in front of them. Rude managed to save Alicia just in time. She was shocked by its speed and thought that the moment she sensed it coming, the monster was already on top of her. Alicia wondered why there were so many monsters there, since they weren't in a dungeon. Rude, on the other hand, noticed that his food had been knocked away again, which made him furious. Irritated, he said he didn't want to be interrupted anymore, and commented that the monster looked perfect for a good roast. But he quickly realized it had fire resistance, so not even oil would work. Rude checked the monster's status and saw that they were very high. He activated his Earth Magic Principle skill, remembering that he only had Quick Step and fire resistance. Even so, he told the monster that it was about to feel the wrath of a glutton and summoned a stone hand to strike. However, the hand shattered easily, leaving Rude confused. The boar's body seemed to be made of iron. The boar then hit Rude with a powerful headbutt, throwing him far away. Without wasting time, it charged at Alicia, who quickly summoned Sylphide, her wind spirit. She unleashed its power with wind magic and thought she had hit the target, but realized the monster hadn't even used defensive abilities. Its muscles and fur were naturally thick and tough. Neither wind nor earth magic seemed strong enough to stop it. Rude saw the monster coming again, but suddenly it stopped. That happened because Rude had activated his roar ability. Firmly, he demanded that the monster not dare ignore him, since their fight was not over yet. He knew he couldn't use Quickstep or Iron Body anymore. He thought that if the fight turned into a battle of endurance, the monster might target Alicia. He assessed his options and concluded he didn't have any skill capable of taking down the enemy in one blow. However, he noticed that the creature only seemed capable of charging in a straight line. Rude then closed his eyes and, for the first time, decided to try something new. Raising his sword, he focused on gathering mana inside his body, imagining it flowing into the blade. The moment the monster got close, Rude dashed forward and cut it in half with a single strike, leaving Alicia completely stunned. Frightened, she asked if he had used mana to enhance the sword, even without having trained for that. Rude replied that he just tried because he felt he could, since mana was leaking from his body. However, right after that, the sword he used shattered into many pieces, which left him completely desperate. Downcast, Rude said he had used that sword a lot, and now there was nothing more to do. Alicia remarked that the weapon probably couldn't handle the amount of mana poured into it, and that a weapon was almost like an extension of an adventurer's body. That's why she knew how sad he must be over the loss. Rude agreed and resigned, said it was better to call it a day. Before that, he went to collect some of the boar's meat. The scene then shifted to the 7th layer of the miasma dungeon, where some adventurers were struggling against the miasma rats. After defeating them, they commented that this was a superior version of the creature, called the Great Miasma Rat, and that it had been an extremely difficult enemy. One of them even said that, even though the rats were strong, they were no match for their teamwork. In the middle of the conversation, one of the adventurers stopped talking. The others asked what had happened, and he replied that he thought he had heard a voice coming from deep within. Then, one of them noticed a strange staircase and wondered why there would be a passage like that there. Curious, they decided to go down and investigate. When they got to the bottom, they found a treasure chest. One of them said it didn't look like a trap, while another wondered what could be inside. When they opened the chest, they found a beautiful sword. Everyone was impressed and felt a magical aura coming from it, thinking they could sell it for a good price. One of the adventurers asked if they were sure the sword wasn't cursed. Another told him to stop being so pessimistic and said they should enjoy their luck, since it had been a while since they had seen the miasma butcher, and, without him, they no longer had an easy way to make money. They believed that sword was a blessing from the heavens as a reward for their effort that night. As they celebrated, one of them mentioned that he had heard the miasma butcher was now traveling with a very beautiful elf. The others laughed and mocked him, saying he thought too highly of himself, but that next time they met him they would teach him a lesson and put him in his place. Despite the light atmosphere, the chubby boy in the group was still suspicious of the sword. And just before the scene changed, the sword began to whisper, asking to kill. The next scene took place in the border city of Bologna, where Rude was thinking about his new sword. He decided to visit an old acquaintance, the owner of the weapon shop, to ask for advice. There he found the blacksmith Dowen, who examined the broken pieces of the sword. Dowen remarked that, for a sword he had forged himself to break like that, it wasn't just brute force that caused it, there was something more. He asked what Rude had imbued into the weapon. Alicia, beside him, whispered if he was really going to tell the old man everything. Rude replied yes, because he had known Dowen for a long time and knew he wasn't the kind of man to spread others' secrets. After some time explaining, Rude told everything to the blacksmith. Dowen then understood the reason behind Rude's high power. Eating monsters really did give him special abilities, which explained his sudden increase in strength. Despite everything Rude had told him, Dowen didn't seem surprised at all. Calmly, he said that as long as the taste was good, he didn't care what Rude ate. What mattered now was that he needed a sword capable of withstanding mana-infused strikes. However, taking into account the time needed for research and forging, it would be a while before he could create a new weapon. Rude asked if there was anything he could do to help, and Dowen replied that high-quality magic stones would be very useful. Rude then mentioned that he had some materials saved and, without delay, tossed several stones onto the table. This shocked Dowen, as among the items were magic stones from a general lizard, a Baphomet, and even a minotaur. The old blacksmith commented that it was impressive how much Rude's abilities had evolved, and Rude replied that being praised by him was quite satisfying. Dowen said that if he needed anything else, he would call for Rude, and for now, he could use another sword as a temporary replacement. But he warned seriously that under no circumstances should Rude infuse mana into that temporary weapon. If he broke it, Dowen would demand an absurd amount of compensation. The scene then shifted to a bar, where Alicia was already drinking again. She commented that from now on they would use magical attacks as part of their strategy. Rude said that old Dowen was really scary when it came to swords. Alicia, while acknowledging that he was intense, said she was happy to meet Rude's first friend. He, in turn, apologized for being such a lonely guy. Then, the adventurers who had found the mysterious sword approached, saying it looked like they were having fun and asked if they could join them. One of them again called Rude the miasma butcher. The atmosphere grew tense, and Alicia stood up asking if they had a problem. If so, they could settle it with a good drinking contest, like proper adventurers. Before they could respond, one of the adventurers started trembling and collapsed on the table, leaving his friends alarmed. His name was Rondo. One of his friends asked if he had drunk something strange, but then noticed Rondo was still holding the sword, now emanating a strange red aura. He questioned why Rondo still hadn't sold that weapon and realized it was still whispering to kill. Rondo, in a disturbed tone, told the sword to shut up and, in a sudden outburst, attacked his own friend, cutting his chest unexpectedly. He then charged at Alicia, but Rude stepped in front of her, blocking the attack and stating that this wouldn't end with just a drinking session. While trying to figure out what was wrong with Rondo, the other adventurers in the bar stood up, outraged, demanding to know what he thought he was doing. They tried to restrain him, but the sword cut them all down at once. The weapon apologized, saying it would destroy everything in its path. Alicia then unleashed a powerful spell at Rondo, breaking a wall of the bar, which left the owner completely shocked. But to everyone's surprise, Rondo got up as if nothing had happened. Rude asked if Alicia had held back in her attack, and she replied that an average adventurer shouldn't even be standing after that. Rondo, consumed by madness, screamed that he would kill everyone and launched another attack. Rude realized this was far more serious. Alicia then said that anyone with healing magic should tend to the wounded, while she tried to contain the situation. While observing Rondo, Rude noticed he was in a state of madness. He understood that Rondo had entered berserker mode and that his stats were far higher than normal. Alicia warned that she would use her magic at full strength and told Rude to step back. She launched her attack but realized that the spell was nullified by the sword. Apparently, it had absorbed the energy. She then warned Rude that the sword was cursed. He asked if Rondo was getting stronger by absorbing magic and soon saw red tentacles forming around his body. Rondo attacked Rude, who managed to block it, though with great effort. The strength behind the blow was absurd. Rude landed several hits in return but noticed the tentacles were closing the enemy's wounds. Alicia hesitated to use support magic, fearing the sword would absorb it again. She knew that to truly help, she would need to find an opening and land a decisive blow. It was then that the chubby boy from the group, crying, begged them not to kill his friend. He said he knew they had done terrible things to Rude, but that for a failure like him, who had always been looked down on, Magnus and Rondo were like family. Through tears, he pleaded for mercy. Rude then smiled and said he would do his best. He asked them to leave it to him, at least for now, and said he would try to use substitution. He knew that when he had used that ability on Alicia, it had taken about 10 seconds. The problem was how to keep Rondo under control during that time. Rondo landed another blow, which Rude barely managed to block. The impact was immense. Thinking quickly, he concluded that if he could at least immobilize the sword, that would already be a big help. Using his Earth Magic Principle ability, he said that magic couldn't be absorbed by the weapon. The strategy worked. Rude managed to restrain Rondo and thought that if the source of the altered status really was a curse, maybe he could free him the same way he had with Alicia. With that in mind, he activated his substitution ability and touched Rondo, trying to bring him back to his senses. Rondo started screaming desperately, and at that moment, it seemed Rude's ability was working. Consumed by panic, Rondo began to cry, begging Rude for help, but Rude couldn't hold on any longer. The curse was much stronger than he had imagined. Unable to resist, Rude was thrown back by the force of the curse. He tried to stay calm, saying he was still fine, but he knew his substitution had failed. It wasn't Rondo who rejected his ability. It was as if the sword had a will of its own, and maybe he needed to weaken it a bit more before trying again. Realizing this, Rude activated his fire magic principle and launched flames at Rondo, trying to break the curse. But at that exact moment, Rondo managed to partially break free. Rude then realized he had only managed to remove the curse from Rondo's left arm. That meant he needed to stay out of reach of the right arm to avoid getting hit. Still, something was wrong. Rude noticed that Rondo's movements had changed. More importantly, his magic had been absorbed again. Alicia, observing the scene, realized what was happening. She concluded that this could be an incarnation, and if that were true, the body no longer belonged to Rondo. According to the system, the new name of the creature was Gran, the two-headed curse. The curse then quickly charged at Rude, but he managed to dodge. The battle between them resumed with intensity. However, Rude was hit hard in the face. He realized that the curse was extremely fast, but not only that, its movements were precise and efficient, like those of a seasoned warrior. While he tried to understand the situation, the curse was already behind him again. At that moment, Alicia appeared and saved Rude by casting a powerful spell directly at the creature's chest. She said she had no choice but to step into the fight. Rude thanked her for saving his life and admitted he didn't know she could fight so well up close. Alicia explained that a mage who became useless when the enemy got close was just a burden to their allies. Given the situation, Alicia said the enemy was too strong for them to keep holding back. She warned that Rude needed to decide quickly, as the curse had already progressed too far. The only way to stop it was by destroying its heart. Rude hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed. At that moment, Magnus woke up. Still disoriented, he asked what that girl named Eli had said earlier. Without waiting for an answer, he prepared to return to the fight. Rude thought that even with two people, they wouldn't be able to create an opening. He started to suspect that the creature's two heads were expanding its field of vision. With that theory in mind, he asked Alicia to fall back a bit. Rude then activated his fire magic again. Alicia understood the plan. If he used the magic to kick up dust, maybe the creature wouldn't be able to absorb the energy. With the smoke screen in place, Rodon appeared behind the curse and managed to land a strike to its back. Right after that, Alicia summoned the earth spirit Nomia with her elemental magic. She fired a powerful shot, but to her surprise, the attack only scratched the curse's arm. To everyone's astonishment, the chubby adventurer managed to hold down the curse's arm. Magnus was helping too. They had decided that if they were going to die, they would die together. With all his strength, Magnus drove his sword into Rondo's heart. At that moment, the curse began to dissipate, and Rondo's body collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Everyone was deeply saddened by the scene. Rondo's two adventurer friends started crying and fell to the ground beside their companion's body. Meanwhile, Rude stared at the cursed sword. He picked it up, reflecting that even if he hit it, there was no way of knowing who might be its next victim. The sword then began to whisper, asking Rude to kill. However, he activated his status ailment nullification, told the sword to shut up, and said it would have no power over him. Soon after, Lankarse arrived and asked if everyone was all right. Rude replied that the battle was over. Seeing the situation, Lankarse quickly understood what had happened. He then asked everyone to return to the guild and explain everything in detail. In another scene, Lankarse concluded that the cursed sword had indeed increased its user's power. With Magnus's testimony, he believed the other adventurers would also be convinced of how serious the threat was. Lankarse asked Rude if he felt anything while holding the sword. Rude explained that thanks to his status ailment nullification ability, the curse had no effect on him. He also said that as long as he carried the sword, no one else would become its victim. Lankarse understood, but warned that if Rude were ever taken over by the curse, he would have to be stopped. Before he could finish, Rude interrupted and said that when that time came, Lankarse could do whatever was necessary. With that, Lankarse thanked both Rude and Alicia for containing the incident and also offered his condolences to Magnus and Rude. However, he stated that there would be no time to rest now. Alicia asked if something had happened. Lankarse explained that the adventurers with him had originally been summoned to deal with another situation. In recent days, the number of monsters appearing outside of dungeons had been increasing at an abnormal rate, and the source seemed to be a newly discovered dungeon in Yahello. According to the research team's findings, the cause of this phenomenon was a certain monster. Rude asked what kind of monster it was. Lankarse replied that it was the miasma dragon Basilista, a creature he had only seen mentioned in books, but whose power level was estimated to be around level 70. This information left Rude and Alicia shocked. However, Lankarse explained that its strength wasn't the biggest issue. The real danger came from the concentration of miasma it emitted. The miasma stimulated other monsters, causing more and more to escape the dungeon. That was why the research team had suffered so many casualties, and the few survivors were currently receiving treatment. He went on to say that if the situation continued, the miasma would completely leak from the dungeon and cause catastrophic damage to nearby areas. That was why he had come to them. Rude said he understood the severity of the situation, but asked to be taken to the research team's survivors before making any decisions. Scene then shifted to the Adventurers Guild medical ward. There, Rude approached one of the survivors and activated his substitution ability, removing the miasma from the person's body. This left Lankarse stunned. He didn't know Rude could nullify even other people's abnormal statuses. Rude explained that it was only possible if the person touched didn't reject him. For that reason, he said only he and Alicia would go on the mission to hunt the dragon. Another adventurer said that was madness, but Lankarse, thinking it over, asked what the real odds were. Rude explained that the fewer people he had to protect from the miasma, the more freely he could move. Besides, he was used to fighting powerful enemies alone. Realizing there were no alternatives, Lankarse accepted the proposal and entrusted the subjugation of the miasma dragon Basilista to Rude and Alicia. The scene shifted again. Rude and Alicia were heading out, and he said they needed to get a good night's sleep to be fully prepared for the next day. Alicia asked if he really thought the two of them could handle the mission alone. Rude replied that this way he could use his abilities without restriction, and with no one else around, it would be better for both of them. He apologized for dragging Alicia into the battle, but she replied that if he had left her out, she would have beaten him up right there. She declared that they were a team, and that the two of them alone were enough to save everyone. The story then advanced to the early floors of the Yahello dungeon. Rude was fighting some goblins, who were visibly affected by the miasma. After defeating them, he commented that the explorers' reports were accurate. They still had at least 5 more floors to go, but no one had said that the miasma had already spread so much. Alicia noted that it showed how quickly the miasma was expanding, and even purification items were starting to fail. Rude then mentioned that the monsters on the upcoming floors didn't even seem alive. Alicia replied that it was still impossible to know how many floors they would have to get through. She also said that Rude's attributes might not work against certain monsters, but if hand-to-hand combat was needed, she was confident she could land at least a few hits. Finally, she stated that if she ran away and left a friend behind again, she would never forgive herself. Rude apologized for making Alicia say that again. He then touched her shoulder and said he would use his substitution to remove the effects of the miasma. He had anticipated this and managed to purify her body every time he touched her. However, as soon as he let go of her shoulder, the miasma would start to accumulate again, even if only slightly. Alicia then had an idea. She said that if they walked hand in hand, he could keep the substitution active at all times. Since she could no longer see her own feet due to the miasma, he would not only purify her but also guide her. Rude understood the suggestion, and the two continued through the dungeon holding hands. When they reached the middle floors, they noticed that the deeper they went, the denser the miasma became. Rude used his echolocation and detected 2 monsters ahead. He commented that if those creatures had survived such a concentration of miasma, they were probably very strong enemies. He noted that he had never seen monsters like those before. Alicia asked if there was a way to avoid them, and Rude said yes, but that he preferred to face them. When she suspiciously asked if he wanted to eat them, Rude awkwardly explained that wasn't the reason, but rather because of the cursed sword Gran, which he wanted to test before facing the miasma dragon. It was then explained that anyone who touched Gran's sword would have their consciousness sealed and fall into a constant state of madness. At that moment, the monsters appeared. They were giant dung beetles with abilities like Iron Body, poison resistance, miasma resistance, and paralysis resistance. Rude used his earth magic principles against them, and Alicia praised the move, though she noticed the attack had little effect. The beetles then began to roll and charge violently toward them. Rude asked if Alicia could stop them, and she said yes, but she'd have to let go of his hand. She then summoned the earth spirit Nomiya and used a giant earth hand to block one of the beetles. However, she warned that she wouldn't be able to hold it for long. Rude said it was the right moment to test his sword. Thinking to himself, he asked it not to break in his hand and charged at high speed toward the monster. The strike slashed across the creature's chest, but was shallow. He realized that if the sword lacked enough power, he would have to take even more risks. Rude signaled to Alicia, and she understood. She cast wind magic directly into the sword, which immediately absorbed the energy. Rude silently asked the sword to show its true power. With that, he was able to cut through the monster with ease. Seeing the second one coming from behind, he finished it off quickly. He returned to Alicia and commented that her magic control was impressive. She simply replied that everything went as expected. Rude then took her hand again and reactivated substitution. Shortly after, Rude asked if he could absorb a bit more mana, since the magic energy she had provided wasn't enough to fully restore him. Alicia teased him, saying that, in the end, he really did want to eat them. Embarrassed, he said he just wanted to cut the monsters and take the meat to eat later. The scene then changed. Rude had already roasted a piece of one of the beetles' meat and was eating. He commented that the taste was unique. Alicia asked what it was like using the cursed sword for the first time, and he explained that after absorbing enough mana, his physical stats had drastically improved. She remarked that the most important thing was that the sword didn't seem to break as long as it was energized with mana. Rude said he was worried about the sword's effectiveness against the miasma dragon, which, according to witnesses, was bigger than a tree. In terms of weight and impact, his previous sword had been superior. The new sword didn't seem to like that comment. Right after, it started to communicate with him, asking for something. Rude was confused, wondering if the sword also wanted meat, but it replied that what it needed was magic stones. He then crouched down, picked up a magic stone from one of the defeated beetles, and offered it to the sword, which grabbed it with an eye. Upon absorbing the stone, the sword began to grow. Alicia asked how he knew to do that, and Rude replied that it was the sword who told him, but he wondered if it was mad at him for calling it weak. He said that now that he understood better how the sword worked, it would be much easier to control it. Alicia then remarked that they needed to continue to the lower levels, where the miasma dragon had last been seen. However, at that moment, they heard a loud roar echoing through the dungeon. The two wondered whether the roar had really come from the dragon. They soon realized the ceiling was about to collapse. They knew they needed to contain the cave-in with earth magic immediately. Alicia warned that if they only tried to protect themselves, the stairs would be blocked and they would lose their only chance to face the miasma dragon. Alicia realized that before everything collapsed, they needed to get through that part of the dungeon as quickly as possible. She grabbed Rude's hand and activated her wind magic. With great effort, the two barely managed to cross the critical area in time. On the other side, Rude, relieved and with an awkward smile, commented that he thought he was going to die. Alicia, also embarrassed, admitted she had used more magic than expected. She noted that this floor was extremely dark, but Rude explained that even so, he could use his thermal vision. With that, they decided to move slowly while searching for enemies in that miasma-filled environment. During the search, Rude noticed a creature approaching from the other side. After analyzing it, he concluded that it was the miasma dragon known as Basilista. It was a level 75 creature with very high stats, possessing a total of 18 abilities. Although its agility was not high, its vitality exceeded 500 points. When Alicia asked about the dragon's abilities, Rude replied that it had poisonous claws and fangs. At that moment, the miasma dragon sensed their presence. Distressed, Alicia quickly asked what magical resistances the dragon had, and Rude informed her that they were fire, earth, and darkness. Knowing this, Alicia decided to use the other attributes and asked Rude to take the front. The dragon let out a loud roar, and Rude, already preparing himself, thought it would be better to keep his distance and observe the creature's attack patterns. However, with the miasma so thick around them, he knew Alicia wouldn't last long, so he concluded that he had to finish this as quickly as possible. The dragon launched a powerful attack toward Rude, who managed to dodge only thanks to his instant pass ability. Alicia noticed that both the pillar and the floor melted on impact, indicating that the heat released by the dragon was extremely intense. To help, she activated her feed, increasing Rude's speed. With this, he managed to land his first strike on the dragon, but noticed that the creature's skin was very resistant, likely due to its dragon scale ability. His sword wasn't effective, and not even magic seemed to have any impact. Alicia tried casting her spirit magic, but the result was only a superficial cut. The dragon retaliated with a tail attack, destroying a pillar and launching stone spikes at them. Alicia activated her shield, and Rude used Iron Body to defend himself. He realized that the dragon not only had great defense, but also long-range attacks. Faced with that, he wondered how they could possibly defeat such a powerful enemy. At that moment, Alicia asked Rude to buy her some time because she intended to use a special move before her magic ran out completely. He understood the plan, and Alicia began concentrating. The dragon, in turn, was already preparing to attack her again. To protect her, Rude activated his earth magic, jumped, and struck the dragon's head with his sword. Alicia, aware that she was vulnerable, fully entrusted her defense to Rude while gathering all her magic for a single attack. She summoned the fire spirit San, the water spirit, the earth spirit Namia, and the lightning spirit Wakan. She focused them all into a single shot. The dragon reacted by using its dark magic and launched it directly at Alicia, but Rude intercepted the attack with his sword, which absorbed all the dark energy. With that, Alicia declared that she was ready and asked Rude to step aside. She then unleashed the powerful attack called Spirit Quintet. The dragon responded with an equally devastating blow, and the two powers collided, causing a massive explosion. Even with the full force of that blast, Alicia admitted that in the past, she would have brought the dragon down with a single shot. This time, however, it was only slightly injured. Rude touched her shoulder and used his substitution ability, praising the attack and saying it was his turn now. The dragon was also weakened. Alicia apologized for making him use substitution again and said she had used up all her remaining magic in that last attack. Rude replied that she should rest and save the little magic she had left for her own defense, because from then on, she could leave everything to him. As she stepped back, she asked Rude to be careful. Rude and the dragon stared each other down, and the creature roared in fury. In response, Rude activated his roar ability to try and intimidate it. He charged into the final battle, realizing that the dark magic he had absorbed was now infused into his sword, making his body overflow with power in that moment. Rude managed to strike the dragon's legs and noticed that the scales were starting to come off, which made his attacks much easier. Taking advantage of this, he began attacking the dragon in various ways. However, he noticed that his sword was becoming less effective active, as the mana it had absorbed was gradually running out. The dragon then activated its miasma wave ability and launched it at Rude. Although the miasma itself didn't affect him directly, the shockwave pushed him back. Then the dragon fired spikes in his direction. Rude thought he wouldn't be able to dodge in time and activated his instant pass ability. However, the dragon was even faster and appeared in front of him, landing a direct hit. Even using Iron Body and his sword to defend, the impact was so strong that it threw him against the wall. As he recovered, Rude reflected on the blow and acknowledged that dragons truly were impressive creatures. His situation was becoming critical, as he was now cornered. At that moment, Rude shouted his own name, remembering the time he nearly died fighting the Red Minotaur. But at the same time, he recognized that things were different now. He was no longer the same and had become much stronger. He then activated his earth magic principle and charged at the dragon, which was already preparing its fire breath. Rude thought he could dodge using his web threads, but realized that if he kept just dodging, he would lose the battle of endurance. So he decided to use them as a sling. The dragon launched its fire attack, and Rude blocked it with his sword, enduring the unbearable heat. Even though he couldn't counter the heat directly, he realized he could absorb the mana within the breath. If he could hold out long enough, he could use that energy to reinforce his sword and release it all at once. Rude held on as long as he could, but was already at his limit. At that moment, Alicia activated her water magic on him, helping him endure the extreme heat. Grateful, Rude split the dragon's fire breath in half with his sword. Immediately afterward, he launched his strike and managed to cut the dragon in half, finally defeating the enemy. Exhausted, Rude collapsed to the ground, and Alicia approached, saying she would cast a healing spell on him. But Rude asked her not to push herself, saying she had already overused her magic. Instead, he activated his bloodsuck ability, explaining that he could recover a little by absorbing the dragon's blood. After regenerating a bit, he said it was time for a break. He asked Alicia to give him her hand, activating his substitution ability. Alicia lay down beside him, and Rude commented that they had finally completed the mission. Alicia agreed but said they were only just beginning. Rude reflected on the rank S adventurer and acknowledged that this person was still far stronger than he was now. He then told Alicia they had a long road ahead, but before moving on, they needed to collect some of the miasma dragon's meat. After that, they headed deeper into the dungeon. As they continued, they eventually found the dungeon's core. Alicia commented that even among adventurers, it was rare to see something like that, and explained that by using a magic circle there, they could return to the dungeon entrance. She added that, since it was possible to extract materials from the dungeon that didn't exist on the surface, it was common to leave the core intact, even after completing it. However, Rude disagreed, saying that if they left the core as it was, the miasma dragon might one day resurrect. He then thought about the Yahello dungeon, the place where he had lived through the worst experience of his life. But it was precisely there that everything began, and because of that, he was able to open a path to pursue his dream. Drawing his sword, Rude silently thanked that place and destroyed the dungeon core with a single strike. The scene then shifted to the Adventurers Guild, where Lancarses was asking if there was any news about Rude's group. A woman informed him that there was still no sign of their return. Lancarse silently thought about how people called Rude the Miasma Butcher. In the world of adventurers, he knew that power was everything. Even if he tried to intervene, he couldn't stop people from talking. The life of an adventurer without power was always hard and full of struggle, but if Rude was someone who would give up because of that, then that too would just be another path he could choose. At that moment, a man burst into the guild hall in a panic. He announced that Rude and Alicia had just returned using the magic circle. Both were alive and, on top of that, had completed 2 missions, the subjugation of the miasma dragon and the destruction of the dungeon core. The official confirmation of these achievements made everyone in the room cheer excitedly. Lancarse could hardly believe Rude had accomplished something so grand. Thought that he, of all people, would be the one to save the city left him stunned. Standing up, Lancarse declared that they needed to welcome them with honor, because Rude and Alicia were now adventurers with power enough to change fate. The two were warmly received by all the adventurers. Soon after, the scene shifted to Golar, the city neighboring Bologna, where a man furiously complained about the rival city. He said that damn Bologna with so many dungeons, had destroyed that new dungeon without a second thought. That completely ruined their plans to claim ownership of the newly discovered dungeon. Another man, calmer, asked the Lord of Golar if that couldn't actually be seen as something positive. After all, with the dungeon destroyed, Bologna couldn't deny Golar's legitimacy over it. The Lord, known for his greed, replied that if they presented that version of the story, they could demand financial compensation from Bologna based on the profits they might have earned from that dungeon. For him, it was better to profit in that way than to lose adventurers in a risky attempt to take the dungeon by force. However, he also knew that if they acted like that, the Adventurers Guild in Bologna certainly wouldn't remain silent. The other man replied that that was exactly what they wanted. Their intention was to provoke a direct confrontation, to show that Guild and its old leader who really controlled the region. The scene then returned to the forest, where Rude and Alicia were resting. As usual, Rude was doing what he loved most, cooking monster meat. This time, he had prepared a grilled steak made from miasma dragon meat. Alicia, already drooling with hunger, watched the meal with shining eyes. Rude, excited, explained that he had been keeping that meat at the bottom of his bag for quite a while, and the moment to enjoy it had finally arrived. Taking the first bite, he commented that it was delicious. It was the true taste of dragon meat, so flavorful that it made every other meat he had ever tried seem ordinary. The texture, the fat melting in the mouth, the sweetness and the intense flavor of the red meat left him amazed. As he spoke, Alicia continued drooling with hunger. Alicia then stood up, determined, saying that it was settled. That night, they would eat a gourmet-grade meat. But Rude, still eating, replied that he was already enjoying his share. Angry, Alicia complained that he was being selfish and said they needed to decide soon where they would eat, then told him to finish quickly so they could look for a good restaurant nearby. The scene then moved forward to 4 days after the destruction of Yahello dungeon. Lancarse, meeting again with the two of them, apologized for calling them so many times but assured them this would be the last. He informed them that the final mission report had been confirmed and, along with it, came their reward, a sum of 1.5 million range, which left Rude completely shocked. He asked if that was really correct, because it was a huge amount of money. Lancarse explained that the recommended average level for Yahello dungeon was 70, so that amount was fair for someone who took on such a risk. Rude, still stunned, was amazed to see so much money in front of him. Lancarse also announced that since they had managed to complete that dungeon on their own, Rude could no longer remain in rank D. From that moment on, he would be promoted. After that, they said their goodbyes and left the room. Reflecting on it, Rude commented that he had only recently been promoted to rank D and that everything was moving too fast. Right after, Rude's status was displayed. He was level 52, still ranked D. Alicia remarked that even though he had been facing monsters far above his level, he was evolving at an abnormal pace. She thought that normally, after level 40, progress slowed down a lot. Rude then smiled at her and she didn't understand why. That was when he said that he had finally surpassed her level. When Alicia opened her system, she saw that she was still level 45 or I guess, while he had already passed to level 52. Frustrated, she said that wasn't fair, but Rude acknowledged that even with a higher level, when it came to combat power, Alicia was still stronger. She agreed, explaining that level was just a number, and true power was defined by each person's skills and experiences. While they talked, some people approached. It was the Lord of the city of Golar, who appeared before them asking if that was the famous miasma butcher from the rumors. Rude, confused, wanted to know who that man was, noticing his arrogant posture. The Lord, with disdain, questioned if the adventurers from Bologna didn't know who the leader of the neighboring city was. That was when Rude recognized him as the greedy Lord of Golar. The man complained about Rude's audacity for having destroyed the dungeon which, according to him, belonged to Golar, but Rude firmly responded that, as far as he knew, the Yahello dungeon belonged to everyone. The Lord claimed that the dungeon lay on the border between Bologna and Golar. However, he accused Bologna's representatives of being petty, saying they had used a cheap excuse to extort others. They claimed something strange was happening in the dungeon, caused a monster outbreak, and in the end, destroyed the site. He complained that the profits that could have been obtained from that dungeon were lost, and that the damage the monsters caused in his territory would not be compensated. He wanted to know how those bastards planned to pay for all of it. Alicia tried to calm the lord down, saying that this kind of matter should be discussed between guild representatives. According to what she knew, there had been no reports of monsters invading Golar's territory, and she believed the situation had already been brought under control by the adventurers from Bologna. Therefore, they had no right to make such accusations. Rude observed everything and thought that this was just what he expected from a rank S adventurer. She truly had a way with words. However, the other man beside the lord began to smile. He said that it was true then that the Emerald Storm, Alicia, had joined Bologna. He added that since her level was being eroded by the curse of the Abyss Dungeon, it made sense that someone like her would seek refuge in Bologna. Rude then recognized that man. He was the guildmaster of Golar, and he had looked like a scumbag from the beginning. The man went on, saying this was not a matter for mere adventurers to meddle in. He approached Alicia and insulted her, calling her a useless survivor from a group that died for nothing. He said she had no business interfering and called her trash. At that moment, Alicia released her wind aura, which immediately intimidated the guildmaster. He was confused and scared, not understanding how he had been overwhelmed by a girl below level 45. That was when Lancarsi appeared and demanded that everyone stop immediately. He said he would not tolerate fights inside his guild. He asked the lord and the guildmaster to come with him. The guildmaster arrogantly replied that Lancars should keep his dogs on a leash. Rude became irritated by that, wondering what that guy thought he was doing. At that moment, another person appeared, calling out to Alicia. It was an elven man who recognized her and asked if she remembered him. Rude found it strange that yet another person had appeared out of nowhere and asked what was going on. Alicia then recognized the man and called him Ebert. He smiled, satisfied that she finally remembered him. Rude asked if she knew him, and Alicia explained that he had been part of an old party she used to go on adventures with. Ebert said that back then he greatly admired the Azuri trails and that Alicia was amazing, able to use several spirit magics at once. The way she fought was flawless. Being an elf himself, he couldn't help but be inspired by her. He mentioned that he knew how much she had suffered in the Abyssal Dungeon, and because of that, he went to Bologna. Holding Alicia's hand, he asked if she would like to join him again. Alicia thanked him for the gesture, but replied that she was already part of a team. She then introduced Rude to Ebert, who extended his hand and said it was a pleasure to meet him. However, Ebert rejected the gesture and slapped Rude's hand away, saying he knew what had happened in the Abyssal Dungeon. He said he was aware of the curse she had suffered there and found it unbelievable that an S rank like her was now in a team with only one man, known as the Miasma Butcher. He said that if she joined his team, they would make better use of her skills and experience. But Alicia pulled her hand away and replied that he didn't know what he was talking about. She stated that she had chosen to team up with Rude of her own free will, and that any insult against him was also an insult against her. She thanked him for his concern, but explained that the curse had already been lifted. Ebert was shocked, knowing that it was an SS rank curse cast by the boss of the Abyss Dungeon area. Alicia replied that she had been very lucky. She then turned to Rude and said that it would be problematic if his abilities were discovered. So for now, the best option was to keep everything secret. Alicia told Ebert that they were going to update their ranks at that moment and explained that Rude was no longer D rank but had reached C rank. Ebert was surprised by the information and couldn't believe what was happening. He questioned why she was treating him that way, even though he had been thinking about her all that time. Convinced something was wrong, he claimed the so-called Miasma Butcher had brainwashed her. He wanted to know how someone who was just D rank could have defeated the Miasma Dragon. According to him, if Alicia's curse had truly been lifted, then it was probably her who had defeated the dragon, and Rude was just stealing the credit. Rude noticed Ebert's intense stare, which made him look like a lunatic. Alicia then commented that elves, due to their pride, often developed prejudice throughout their long lives. She asked Rude what he thought about that. He smiled and said that since she was also an elf, would she eventually become proud and prejudiced too? Alicia replied that she was a humble, intelligent, and charming elf. Rude then realized that deep down, she was quite proud as well. Shortly after, they arrived at the Adventurers Guild reception, where they were warmly greeted by the receptionist, who said she had already heard everything from the guild master. She handed them the evaluation forms and commented that this was a very rare occurrence. When Rude picked up his paper, he was shocked. He expected to be ranked C, but he had been promoted straight to B rank. The receptionist explained that he had skipped a rank, which was very uncommon. Rude and Alicia celebrated the achievement, and the receptionist said it only proved how difficult the conquest of the Yahello dungeon had been. The report sent by the adventurers from the village they had saved and the victory against Baphomet were also taken into consideration. Rude still couldn't believe he had become B rank. At that moment, Ragood and Magnus appeared. Magnus commented that if it were him, he would be even happier since the entire town was grateful. Alicia then told Rude not to settle for just B rank because his goal was S rank. Rude agreed, stating that his true destiny was to reach S rank. They celebrated again, saying they would keep moving forward. However, Ebert appeared again, interrupting the celebration. He said it was ridiculous to imagine that an idiot could reach S rank. He explained that exploring dungeons required an appropriate rank for safety reasons. According to him, a man who merely followed others did not deserve B rank. He also criticized the Bologna Guild, calling its members idiots. The receptionist replied that it didn't matter what he thought. Ranks were granted based on the guild's official evaluation. Magnus, irritated, asked if Ebert didn't plan to take back what he said unless he wanted to leave there injured. Ebert continued insulting, saying everyone there was a bunch of fools. That enraged Magnus, who tried to grab him, but it was too late. Ebert reacted, throwing Magnus and driving his sword into the ground next to his face, telling him not to touch him with his filthy hand. Alicia asked him to stop, but Ebert insisted, saying Alicia had always been too kind, even to someone deplorable like Rude. Alicia replied that his behavior was wrong. Ebert admitted he knew that, but claimed that elves were naturally prejudiced, and even he found it hard to change his mind once he had decided something. He smiled and said that even he, a humble, intelligent, and charming elf, was subject to sin. As a fellow elf, he believed it was his duty to show her the right path. At that moment, Rude couldn't hold back and began laughing. Both of them looked confused, trying to understand why he was laughing. Rude simply thought that elves really were full of pride. Ebert, annoyed, declared that incompetent adventurers were a danger to others, so he would personally test Rude to see if he truly deserved B rank. The receptionist asked why he thought he could decide that on his own, but Alicia said it was fine. If he doubted Rude's abilities, then he could see them for himself. The scene then shifted to the training area of the Bologna Guild. Alicia apologized to Rude for things getting to that point because of her, but Rude said it wasn't her fault and that he shared responsibility due to his own lack of ability. He said he needed to defeat that arrogant elf quickly to prove he truly deserved B rank. Rude commented that, in the end, adventurers could only silence others through strength. With that, they began preparing for battle. Alicia warned that if either of them got hurt, she would stop the fight immediately. But until then, they could begin. When the fight started, Ebert charged straight at Rude, who managed to block the attack with his cursed sword. Ebert was surprised that Rude could defend himself and admitted he was at least somewhat competent. Then, Ebert began launching a series of attacks with his sword. Rude realized that Ebert was far superior in swordsmanship, and also remembered what Alicia had said, that Ebert could use both offensive and enhancement magic, making him an arcane swordsman. Rude then identified Ebert's abilities as acceleration and physical reinforcement. Suddenly, Ebert vanished from his sight and, in an instant, was behind him, landing a blow to his back. Rude realized he couldn't keep up with his movements and wanted to use his abilities to counterattack, but he couldn't. Ebert stated that he was a B rank, a title only those with real power deserved, and asked Rude if he understood that he was not worthy of standing beside Alicia, let alone carrying the title of B rank. Rude admitted that he was right. His current abilities didn't make him worthy of being by her side, but Alicia had been the one to acknowledge him, so he had to prove himself worthy. Determined, Rude cast an earth spell toward Ebert, who called him an idiot and said he would never win that way. Their spells collided and caused an explosion. The other adventurers watching started to comment that the two were going too far. Ebert declared that it was a shame for the miasma butcher, because that was the brutal difference between their levels. Soon after, Ebert unleashed a powerful blue fire spell at Rude, demanding that he kneel. However, Rude used his sword to absorb the entire attack. He then said he had already guessed Ebert would rely on magic to gain the upper hand, since elves were a very proud race, With his sword now charged, Rude went on the offensive. Ebert realized Rude's strength and skill were at a completely different level from before, and wondered if the sword was magical. Rude replied that he was wrong. The sword wasn't magical, it was cursed. Ebert remarked that this only made him even more twisted and added yet another reason why Alicia shouldn't be with him. Ebert then activated his arcane swordsmanship with lightning enchantment and asked if Rude could keep up with his speed now. With this ability, he quickly closed the distance and struck Rude in the stomach with a move called Lightning Palm. After electrocuting him, Ebert declared that the boy was nothing special and asked Alicia to announce the winner. However, Rude grabbed Ebert's clothes, saying that electric shocks didn't work on him since the paralysis effect had been nullified. Ebert said that was impossible, as the electric charge should have paralyzed him. Rude then headbutted Ebert in the face, knocking the elf to the ground, placed his sword next to Ebert's face and remarked that lately he had become more and more resistant. Everyone around them started cheering, saying the battle was over and Rude was the winner. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to where Lankarsi was. He explained that the feudal lord was busy handling matters in the capital, so he had been entrusted to act in his place. He stated that he understood Galar's demands, since they were responsible for managing that region, and assured that there was an intention to cooperate with recovery efforts for the damages they suffered. However, the lord replied that it had already been made clear that they didn't want cooperation. They wanted fair financial compensation for the losses caused by the dungeon. He said they had taken advantage of the situation and now would have to pay the appropriate amount. At that moment, a woman rushed in and asked for permission to speak, saying there was an emergency. She explained that something strange was happening at the Yahello dungeon, which had already been confirmed as completely destroyed. She reported that the area around it was now covered by an unprecedentedly dense mana, with a concentration classified as B rank. Lankarsi found that impossible, but the woman said 2 gargoyles were guarding the entrance and preventing any outside interference. Faced with this, Lankarsi turned to the Golar representatives and stated that this was no time for pointless quarrels. Though clearly displeased, the 2 men from Golar were forced to listen. Lankarsi stood up and announced that they would organize a subjugation force immediately and go investigate what was happening at the Yahello dungeon. He ordered that all adventurers of B rank or higher be summoned, including Rude. All the adventurers gathered before Lankars, who informed them that they had just confirmed the start of a dungeon cycle. He said they would depart immediately for the Yahello dungeon to subjugate it as quickly as possible. Rude was confused and discreetly asked Alicia what exactly a dungeon cycle was. She explained that it was a rare phenomenon that caused a dungeon to evolve. Though she had heard about it before, this was the first time she would experience it herself. She also mentioned that the phenomenon was occurring due to the collapse of the previous dungeon. Meanwhile, Alicia reflected on the mana concentration around the dungeon, which had been classified as B rank. Rude tried to reassure her, saying that they were also B rank and had A rank adventurers with them, so he believed there wouldn't be any problems. However, Ebert appeared and said he understood Rude's optimism, given that he had only recently been a D rank, but believed he still hadn't grasped the seriousness of the situation. Rude then asked what exactly he meant by that. Ebert explained that if the mana concentration outside the dungeon was B rank, then inside it the mana could be at least A rank and, in the worst case scenario, even S rank. He also mentioned that there had been reports that the dungeon was continuously evolving, as if it were a chrysalis about to burst, and that the surrounding surface would be flooded with mana. This posed a major threat to the nearby cities of Galar and Boulogne, as both could suffer catastrophic damage. Rude was deep in thought about all of this. Lankars, noticing his expression, asked him not to worry too much. He said there were very few records about dungeon cycles and that the phenomenon was still surrounded by mystery, so it might not be as serious as it seemed. Furthermore, since Rude had been the one to complete the previous dungeon, everyone would be counting on him to lead the new expedition. The scene changed to the dungeon entrance, where 2 gargoyles stood guard. Rude began analyzing them and identified both as level 50. Their abilities included Iron Body, Petrifying Breath, Danger Sense, Miasma Resistance, Earth Magic Principles, Regeneration, and Fire Resistance. He noted that they seemed a bit stronger than the rolling beetles they had faced before. Suddenly, the gargoyles noticed the adventurer's presence and charged. One of them unleashed its Petrifying Breath, but Alicia reacted quickly, summoned Sylphide, and the 2 attacks clashed. The other adventurers were impressed by Alicia's power. When the second gargoyle attempted to attack, Lankarsi punched it directly in the head and the guildmaster then sliced off the other's head. Rude was amazed by their strength. Lancaster then told everyone to hurry. Meanwhile, Rude looked at the remains of the gargoyles and thought they looked edible. Using his fire magic principle, he burned the head of one of them. The guildmaster silently watched, not understanding what Rude was doing. Rude explained that he needed to finish off the enemy because it had a regeneration ability. Discreetly, Rude kept a piece of the gargoyle's meat and entered the dungeon with the others. Lancaster commented that there seemed to be less miasma than before, and even the nature of the dungeon felt different. Rude agreed, saying the shape and layout hadn't changed much. However, Alicia warned that they couldn't let their guard down, as they didn't know what was happening on the deeper floors. Even if the structure seemed familiar, it was almost certain that the monsters had changed and become stronger than before. Soon after, a new group of monsters appeared. Lancaster said he would take on the larger dragon and asked the others to pick their opponents from among the smaller creatures. All the adventurers activated their skills and charged into battle. Alicia told Rude they needed to help too, but at that moment he noticed that his system had activated abnormal status nullification and that Warrior's honor had been disabled. Meanwhile, Lancaster was ready to fight. Wielding his axe, he faced the larger dragon charging at him. The monster didn't even have time to react, as Lancaster split it in half with a single blow. Rude began to reflect on how his abnormal status nullification also negated support magic, which was something new to him. In the meantime, one of the adventurers used a skill called Taunt, drawing all the monsters toward him. He then declared that he would blow them all up and said it was now time for the others to act. Ebert and another adventurer took advantage of the opening and attacked the monsters at the same time, managing to wipe them out completely. A masked adventurer remarked that the enemies didn't have easily identifiable weaknesses, so it was best to simply crush them with full force. All the adventurers began activating their spells and launched powerful attacks at the monsters. However, another member of the group warned that the taunt would soon wear off and told everyone to be cautious. At that moment, a new monster emerged from the ground and grabbed one of the adventurers. Before it was too late, one of the female adventurers quickly sliced off the creature's head and saved him. The man nearby complained that her attack had come dangerously close to his face and asked her to be more careful next time. The girl just laughed, teasing him. Rude watched everything and thought that everyone there was extremely strong, but what impressed him most was their flawless teamwork. It was hard to believe they were just an improvised group. He started to feel like he wasn't contributing at all and that he was becoming a burden, but then he noticed something strange. A creature was moving from one monster to another. He quickly realized they were parasites and prepared to fight. Determined to be useful, Rude activated his earth magic principles and launched an attack. However, his strike was completely neutralized, and he didn't understand why. When he used his analysis skill, he discovered that the monster had an ability called Earth Removal, which explained why his attack had failed. Suddenly, the guildmaster appeared and decapitated the monster, saying the best way to deal with parasites was to cut off their heads. He then mocked Rude, saying that only a complete idiot would use earth magic against a creature born from the ground, and even teased him for deactivating his own warrior's honor skill. Rude acknowledged that he was right. He didn't have the experience to work with such a diverse group, and also couldn't receive magic support from his allies. At that moment, he truly felt like a burden. Ebert took advantage of the situation to mock Rude, saying he clearly couldn't keep up with the battle, and that teamwork was the foundation for any adventurer. Even if he had won that earlier fight, in the end he was still just the miasma butcher. According to Ebert, someone like him should never have reached B rank. As he spoke, Alicia glared at him with a threatening expression, clearly displeased by what she was hearing. At that instant, a powerful explosion occurred behind the group. The adventurers turned in alarm and asked if Lancaster was okay. He replied that he was, but there was something more important. He informed them that the creature they were fighting had started parasitizing its fallen allies. Their wounds were regenerating, and not only that, their combat power had increased significantly. The guildmaster commented that, because of this, he now only needed to face one much stronger enemy, and said he would lend a hand in that battle. But suddenly, a creature bit his neck. When he killed it, he realized the enemy's true goal was for small parasites to inject venom into the adventurers. Because of that, one by one, the adventurers started being bitten, and then petrified. After everyone was petrified, the monster was preparing to finish them off, but thanks to his web manipulation skill, Rude managed to save Lankarse using his nullification ability to cancel the petrification effect. He took responsibility for facing the enemy and, with his substitution ability, also freed Alicia from the petrification. By analyzing the enemy, he realized it was a level 66 monster without significant magical resistance. So he asked Alicia to use her magic to break the monster's stance, setting the stage for an attack. After focusing, Rude summoned Nomea and Sylphide, unleashing a powerful blow that hit the monster's face and sent it flying. However, something unexpected happened. Between the monster's legs, another creature emerged in an embarrassing way, which disgusted both of them. Soon, those creatures began to multiply and charge at them. Determined to end it all, Rude activated his lightning cloak, electrocuting all the monsters at once. Meanwhile, Lankarse, still petrified, watched everything unfold. When the main monster launched an attack, Alicia reacted quickly. She cast a spell that threw the enemy into the air, creating an opening for Rude. He used his instant step to approach and tried to slash it with his sword, but the monster managed to dodge. Alicia warned him to be careful. At the moment the monster tried to strike Rude, Lankarse appeared to protect him, surprising everyone. Rude was impressed and asked how he had broken free from the petrification. Lankarse explained that he circulated mana through his body, thanked him for buying time, and said they needed to finish the fight quickly. Then Rude focused his mana into his sword and, with a single strike, decapitated the monster with ease. He realized he could now better control the amount of mana he channeled into his weapon. Right after, Alicia called his attention. Rude decided he wouldn't allow the monster to regenerate again. To ensure that, he launched poisonous stingers at the enemy. Alicia observed that the poison was corroding the monster faster than it could regenerate, showing how powerful it was. Rude also remembered that during the fight against the miasma dragon, his ability to nullify abnormal states had been essential, since without it, the battle would have been much more dangerous. At that moment, Lankarse asked if he intended to tell everyone his secret. Rude admitted that he wouldn't be able to avoid explaining it, since he couldn't hide it for much longer. Before anything else, he used his substitution ability to heal everyone. Then he explained what had really happened to him. Lankarse said it was hard to believe, but after seeing how Rude fought, he decided to trust him. Ebert, in turn, commented that it was wonderful and that in all his years of life, he had never witnessed something so miraculous. Rude reminded Ebert that he had recently called him useless, saying he wasn't even fit to be an adventurer. Ebert, embarrassed, asked him to ignore that detail and admitted that Rude was more than capable of accompanying Alicia. In the middle of the conversation, a red-haired girl asked if he had really eaten monsters. Rude, showing 2 heads of defeated monsters, confirmed and said he planned to cook a bit. He began preparing the meat, explaining that it needed to be cooked on low heat until the sides were well done, and that he would use herbs to remove the strong smell. All the adventurers watched, surprised by the process. Seeing him eat, they questioned if it was really possible. One of the men warned that despite the good appearance, eating that could be deadly. The guildmaster found the scene very peculiar and noticed that Rude seemed to have recovered mana by eating. Rude explained that it wasn't magic but mana. This impressed the man, since there wasn't the evil smell usually associated with demons. On the contrary, it seemed like something sacred. Rude then asked Lankarse if they shouldn't retreat to request reinforcements, since they had little information about the monsters in that dungeon. Lankarse replied no. According to him, the longer they waited, the more the dungeon cycle would advance. Now that they had reliable companions, they would conquer that dungeon on their own. They advanced to a door and realized they were close to the boss room. However, Rude commented that they had forgotten the path had collapsed. Lankarse agreed that there seemed to be no choice but to turn back. But Rude remembered the ability the monster had used and activated his own earth and soil removal technique, clearing the passage. Everyone celebrated seeing the path open, commenting that the boss room was just ahead. When they entered, something surprised them. There was a huge glowing egg in the center of the room, causing a mix of anticipation agitation and fear in everyone. Upon arriving in the lit chamber, Lenkarsi immediately realized what it was and explained that it was the egg of the wise dragon. Rude, knowing nothing about it, asked him what exactly this dragon was. Lenkarsi said he had only read a few mentions in old books. According to legends, the wise dragon was a legendary creature that went through eternal cycles of life and death. When its body was destroyed, its soul didn't die but reincarnated, using the dungeon as a kind of incubator. He also said that even when reborn in a new body, the dragon retained all its wisdom, and that some reports claimed it understood the human language and could even predict the future. While they listened, part of the group began to comment that, in the end, it was just an egg, and that they could destroy it before it hatched. But Lenkarsi ordered them to stop immediately. Before they could discuss further, one of the adventurers was struck violently and thrown far away. At that moment, everyone noticed, shocked, that the egg was moving on its own. Lenkarsi wondered if that was the egg's instinct for self-preservation and warned everyone to get into defensive position. Although it was still an egg, he reminded them it was a dragon. Rude, using his analysis ability, confirmed that it was indeed a level 1 wise dragon egg. However, the data was obscured, preventing him from seeing the full stats. Faced with the situation, one of the adventurers suggested retreating and waiting for reinforcements. But the guildmaster explained that if the egg hatched, it wouldn't matter how many S-class adventurers they brought afterward, it would be impossible to contain it. Lenkarsi agreed and said they needed to destroy it as soon as possible. He then asked for everyone's support and instructed them to aim at the tentacles and the legs that were emerging while he advanced, cutting everything in his path. Even so, they soon realized that the parts of the egg were regenerating at an impressive speed, something not even Lenkarsi could immediately explain. He then asked Rude for a favor. As the egg began to emit strange screams, Rude agreed to help without hesitation. Lenkarsi prepared himself again, charging forward to cut all the legs and tentacles, joined by the other adventurers who also began attacking in a coordinated manner. After destroying the legs once more, Alicia realized that the right moment had come. Rude, focused, decided to test his magic-imbued sword to see if the egg could withstand it. With precision, he sliced the egg in half. Everyone celebrated the fact that Rude had finally managed to split the egg, but the celebration quickly turned to shock as the dragon began to emerge from within. Alicia was stunned to see that the main body of the dragon was practically intact. She tried to finish it off using the power of Sylphide, but the egg regenerated before the wind blade could hit. The guildmaster concluded that they wouldn't get anywhere like that. Then, everyone felt a chilling sensation when the egg began to glow intensely, filling the room with an eerie presence. Lenkarsi immediately understood that the wise dragon was about to be born and declared that there was no more time. They needed to defeat it at once, with an extremely powerful blow, as its regeneration ability was a terrible threat. He explained that, despite the rest being resistant, the tentacles were weaker and that everyone needed to attack together to create an opening. The group split up to strike from different sides. Alicia and Rude agreed to handle the left side, right in front of them. While all the adventurers rushed toward the egg, it began to counterattack differently, launching dangerous charges. One of the adventurers raised a magic barrier to protect the group. Alicia assured that she would maintain the defense and asked the others to focus on the attack. At that moment, Lenkarsi activated his charge skill, which doubled the damage of his next attack when powered with mana. Alicia noticed what he was doing and began thinking about how to coordinate the attacks to break the tentacles at the right time. Rude, noticing her concern, said he would handle it. He activated his command skill, which allowed him to transmit his voice directly into everyone's mind. The adventurers were surprised, finding the technique amazing. Rude explained that he would begin a countdown and that everyone should attack together when he reached one. When the countdown ended, they all advanced at once and destroyed the egg's tentacles, creating the much-needed opening. Rude then gave the signal to Lenkarsi, who, without hesitation, used his absolute void ability, channeling an incredibly powerful attack toward the egg. The blow was so intense that the old warrior nearly lost consciousness from exhaustion, but in the end, they managed to deal devastating damage to the enemy. When the dust from the final strike settled, the guildmaster reluctantly admitted that without everyone's help, they would not have been able to win that battle. Rude finally realized they had triumphed and began celebrating with the group. However, hidden among the destroyed egg's tentacles, there was a masked adventurer. He approached eagerly, hoping to retrieve the wise dragon's magic stone and profit greatly from it. After searching for a while, he realized he couldn't find the stone anywhere. Suddenly, he was struck by a brutal blow to the chest that pierced straight through him. A new monster appeared before everyone. It explained with disdain that its reincarnation had failed, but that it wasn't entirely useless. It acknowledged that its body wouldn't last long, but only needed to survive until its next reincarnation. Before that, it declared it would eliminate all the vermin who dared to interrupt its rebirth. The guildmaster quickly warned the group not to let their guard down, saying he could still clearly feel the enemy's presence. At that moment, Orpheus, the wise dragon, appeared before them, shocking everyone. The group wondered how he was still alive. Alicia reflected that, at the moment of the attack, he had likely buried himself underground to escape. Orpheus mocked them, calling them foolish humans who defied the gods and labeling them as insignificant creatures. Rude was amazed to realize that the dragon could actually speak to them. Lancarce explained that true dragons held a status even higher than common dragons, being almost like divine entities. Because of that, they were capable of understanding and speaking the human language. The dragon continued observing Rude, saying it sensed a repulsive impurity inside him, something that seemed human but also resembled a monster. Then it stood up and provoked Rude, promising to make him tremble in pure despair. Meanwhile, the girl responsible for the barrier warned that she could not maintain it for much longer. She then activated her shadow cloak, surrounding herself completely in darkness and disappearing from the scene. At that moment, the dragon's arm fell to the ground, beginning to dissolve rapidly. One of the adventurers commented that it was probably rotting, and Lancarce recognized that it was the perfect moment to attack, but he also realized that he had just used a powerful strike and, if possible, needed time to recover. Another adventurer, exhausted and terrified, looked at the monster and admitted he had no strength left to fight. He decided to flee, but the dragon mocked him, asking if he truly believed he could escape. Using stone pillars, it blocked all the exits from the room, making it clear that no one would leave there alive. Even with just one hand, it declared that it was enough to wipe them all out. Faced with this, Lancarce said that if they couldn't escape, then they would show the dragon how dangerous those rats could be. With no other choice, all the adventurers charged at the elder dragon at once, but they quickly realized nothing worked. Every move was anticipated, as if the dragon could predict each of their actions. Orpheus ridiculed their collective effort, questioning if that was the best they could do, and demanding that they entertain him more. He then activated his devastating ability, hitting everyone at once with his skybreaker, throwing them far. Alicia, concerned, asked if Rude was hurt, but he replied that he was fine, although nearly out of mana after the previous battles. Alicia then declared that she would end it once and for all, saying she would use her most powerful attack, Spirit Quintet, and asked him to warn everyone to move out of the way immediately. Using Rude's command skill, Alicia managed to clearly alert all the companions. They organized themselves and prepared to clear the way at the right moment. Alicia began to gather as much power as possible, calling upon her elemental spirits. When she finished charging her magic, she shouted mentally for everyone to step aside. She then launched her most destructive attack at the dragon. For a moment, everyone held their breath, hoping the strike had finished him. But in the middle of the smoke, they saw the dragon was still alive. He had blocked the attack with only one hand, commenting that he had been a bit careless. At that exact moment, Lancarce appeared above him, ready to decapitate him. However, the dragon, with a quick movement of his tail, struck him and sent him flying. Another adventurer tried to immobilize him with magical vines, while Ebert attempted a strike from behind, but the dragon used its jaw to break Ebert's sword effortlessly. Ebert was stunned, convinced he had found the enemy's blind spot, yet even so, his attack had no effect. The dragon mocked him, saying that would not be enough to stop him, and then launched another powerful attack, hitting all the adventurers at once and leaving them defeated on the ground. At that moment, Alicia fell into despair upon seeing her companions once again defeated by the wise dragon. The scene reminded her of the day she lost all her allies in another dungeon, making it clear to herself that once again she wouldn't be able to save anyone. Meanwhile, the dragon advanced until he stood right in front of her. He almost seemed to recognize her effort but said he would annihilate her there and then, turning her into nourishment for his wisdom. Rude, despite his injuries, stood up with effort. He knew that fighting like this wouldn't lead anywhere. He began to think that if they could at least delay the enemy, they might have a chance to escape using the mana circle in the dungeon's core. He decided to use his web manipulation ability, but to his surprise it didn't activate. Confused, he wondered if he had completely run out of mana. While he struggled with that, the dragon continued to massacre the adventurers around them. Rude understood that if he didn't recover his mana immediately, everyone there would be killed. That was when he noticed the body of a dead gooey monster right beside him, and he considered using it to regain strength. At that moment, the dragon unleashed its dragon breath toward the group. Alicia tried to hold off the attack by summoning Sylphide, creating a barrier of wind. The guildmaster joined her, using his air blade to help block the blow. Even so, the dragon resisted easily by using magical processing, and quickly counterattacked with a combination of water bullet and air slash. The group found the variety of attacks extremely difficult to deal with, frustrating any attempt at coordinated defense. The dragon continued to taunt them, saying they hadn't seen anything yet, while forming a sword made of electricity in its hands. This made them tense, speculating whether the attack resembled Lankarsi's void. They then recognized that this was the true power of a dragon's wisdom. The guildmaster analyzed the situation and noticed that while the dragon was charging that electric attack, it became more exposed. He said that if they were going to counterattack, that was the right time. Alicia agreed to provide cover. She summoned Erdeel and imbued her blade with water and lightning, creating an aquatic lightning attack. Alicia transferred this power to the guildmaster, who advanced to strike the dragon's head. But as he got closer, he realized it was all a trap. The dragon was waiting for him, and in a swift blow pierced his chest, killing him. Witnessing this scene traumatized Alicia even more, leaving her frozen in horror. Taking advantage of the opening, the dragon captured one of Alicia's spirits. Curious and cruel, it commented that such a thing was rare and wondered what it might taste like. Alicia desperately begged it not to do it, but Artel was already trapped in its mouth. The dragon then killed the spirit without hesitation. This shock broke Alicia's mind. She fell to her knees, repeating to herself that it couldn't be happening. The dragon coldly explained that powerful techniques should be used only against worthy opponents because they create dangerous openings. There was no need for such effort against rats. It then asked Alicia if she knew why it had used such a dirty tactic. It revealed that it did it just to see the despair in her eyes and cruelly said it now wanted to discover the taste of an elf. When it was about to devour her head, Rude appeared and struck it violently with a shoulder blow. At that moment, something in Rude was completely different. When the scene returned to the dragon, its face was deformed, with one eye ripped out from Rude's attack. Furious, the dragon shouted that the body it inhabited was incompetent, and revealed that Rude had eaten the shell of its egg, transforming into something different. Rude felt an immense amount of mana flowing through his body, but even with this power, he couldn't control anything. In a fit of madness, he ended up attacking Alicia herself. The dragon watched with satisfaction, explaining that Rude had absorbed so much mana that he was now practically a monster. It added that it was intriguing but that he wouldn't last long in that state, being unworthy even of fighting it. Rude felt as if his body was on fire and had the impression that he was going crazier by the second. He realized he wouldn't be able to endure much longer in that condition. At that moment, the adventurer who had disappeared reappeared and commented on his disastrous mana control. She approached him, placed a hand on his back, and said she would lend a helping hand. As soon as she touched him, Rude felt something strange in his chest and, surprised, noticed that his mana was finally syncing with his body. Even the dragon couldn't believe what it was seeing. The girl then handed him a sword, asking him to finish off the dragon and send that creature to the grave. Still confused and scared, Rude asked who that girl was. The dragon, irritated at being called a lizard, ordered them not to underestimate it and furiously charged at the two. The girl mocked it, saying that the bookworm couldn't take a joke. When the dragon tried to strike her, Rude stepped in front and, with his sword, managed to cut it in half with surprising ease. Rude then went to the guild leader and used his web manipulation skill to improvise first aid, but quickly realized the wounds were too deep. The girl explained that only she and Rude had the means to escape at that moment, as the rest of the group was severely wounded. She wondered if they should wait for reinforcements, carry each one back to the city, or at least go get help, worried about the difficulty of transporting so many injured people. Suddenly, Rude felt intense pain in his chest. The girl commented that the side effects had started to manifest, explaining that she had forced his mana control to empower him, but his body was already at its limit. At that moment, the dragon, even gravely wounded, began to move and curse them, saying it wouldn't let them leave alive. It promised to take at least one of them down to the abyss. Right after that, the entire dungeon began to shake, showing signs of collapsing. The girl realized that the dragon was acting as a substitute for the dungeon's core, which explained the imminent collapse. Everyone understood they had to get out as quickly as possible. While they ran, huge stones began to fall, almost hitting Alicia. Rude threw himself to save her. Alicia woke up in his arms, hearing him say he had defeated the wise dragon, and that now they just needed to escape the dungeon. Though conscious, Alicia was pale and strange. Rude asked if she was all right, and she explained that she couldn't move because she had run out of magic. Even so, she gave a faint smile and asked him to leave her behind and run. Rude, outraged by the idea, thought about how the whole situation was his fault. The girl insisted they had to hurry or they would be buried alive. Even so, Rude said he couldn't simply flee and abandon everyone. The girl admitted she liked his way of thinking but made it clear that he was making the wrong choice. Rude reflected that if things continued that way, they would all be buried there. Even so, he decided to at least carry Alicia out. However, he hesitated, wondering how he could abandon the others. Because of that, he kept searching for a way to save everyone. Nearly fainting, Alicia asked him once again to flee, but he replied that he would not abandon her. She then shouted at him to run already, explaining that this was exactly what the others had always wanted for her, that at least someone could survive. At that moment, Lancarsi also asked Rude to escape, reminding him that in the life of an adventurer, there would be times when he would lose friends. He added that if those who could live did not survive, then the sacrifice of those who died in battle would be meaningless. As everything grew even more chaotic, new monsters began to appear. Ebert stood up, warning that the dungeon's creatures were gathering. Even so, Rude had already made his decision. He would not let anyone die there. Alicia, however, continued begging him to run. Determined, Rude began facing the monsters appearing in front of him, shouting that he would not run no matter what. He remembered how he had always been called the miasma butcher, and how people had mocked him his whole life, but now he was resolved to fight to protect everyone he could. Rude recalled how incredibly happy he had been when that girl invited him to join her group, accepting the secret he carried. He was even happier when the guild accepted him, finally feeling he had friends who trusted and recognized him. That was why he knew he could never abandon them in that dungeon. As he fought, Rude remembered the words of an S-rank adventurer he had once met. That man had told him to never give up no matter how difficult or painful life became. Reliving that advice, Rude attacked every monster that crossed his path, even as the dungeon began to completely collapse. At that moment, parasites began to infest the fallen dragon's body. Still, Rude was determined not to give up. He realized he had only one option. He activated his self-severing skill, sacrificing his own arm. Even without the limb, he held his sword with the other hand and used his regeneration to recover the lost arm. With his body restored, he charged at the dragon and pierced its abdomen with his sword. Immediately after, he activated his lightning cloak skill, certain it would finish the monster off. But the dragon roared furiously, swearing to annihilate them all, and managed to strike Rude, throwing him far away. Before he hit the ground, someone caught him. When Rude looked at the person's face, he recognized the S-rank adventurer who had saved him as a child. The man praised Rude's efforts and told him to relax because they would all make it out alive. He commented that the dragon had failed in its attempt to reincarnate and was now being parasitized by other monsters, something shameful for a wise dragon. The dragon, enraged, tried to trap them both with vines, but the S-rank adventurer cut everything with ease and blocked the dragon's attack with just one hand. He then asked Orpheus, the wise dragon, if he remembered the life-or-death battle they had fought 5 years ago, saying that back then, The dragon had pushed them to the limit with his divine form. Now, however, Orpheus was in a pitiful state. The dragon responded furiously, telling him to shut up. Before it could react, the S-rank adventurer cut it in half with a single strike. Rude was stunned by the man's strength, recognizing that this was the true power of an S-rank adventurer. Meanwhile, part of the dungeon ceiling threatened to collapse on Alicia. A woman appeared and used her icy winter magic, freezing everything around and preventing the collapse. Rude noticed that the ice had stopped the cave-in and was surprised by it. The woman approached, complaining about the number of strange monsters there, and saying she was starting to feel disgusted. The S-rank adventurer thanked her for the help, calling her Selena, and she commented that Leonis was as reckless as ever, charging in like that. Next, 2 more adventurers arrived. Selena spotted Alicia and rushed to her, saying it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Alicia was surprised and happy to see her again. But Selena quickly noticed how bad Alicia's condition was and asked a companion to hurry and heal everyone. The man then used his sacred light healing magic, eliminating the pain of everyone present. Ebert was amazed by the wide reach of that magic. The healer approached the guildmaster, who was in critical condition, and activated the soul restoration seal, saying that he had closed all the wounds, although everyone was still without stamina or mana. He asked them all to rest for a bit, but explained that he could do nothing for those who had already lost their souls. One of the adventurers, therefore, ended up dying. Leonis then ordered everyone to leave the dungeon immediately and asked those who could not walk to lean on someone. Gradually, everyone began to exit, relieved and happy to be alive. Rude, however, stood still for a moment, observing the remains of monsters scattered across the floor. The scene then shifted to a forest, where they had set up a small camp. There, an adventurer held something in his hands and explained that it was a fragment of Orpheus's dragon soul, which should recover over time and could revive after several years. He said that the group known as the Wings of the Lion of Light had defeated Orpheus 5 years ago, keeping his soul sealed safely in the capital. Lancarse then asked how he had managed to revive in such a remote place like Bologna. The adventurer explained that the royal vault had been recently robbed, which left Lancarse alarmed. Finally, he clarified that Orpheus's resurrection this time only happened because of an artificial anomaly created within the dungeon by someone. Selena, hearing all that, lamented that it was truly a shame. If Alicia had joined the Wings of the Lion of Light, everyone there would be as strong as an army. But Alicia explained that her level had dropped a lot and that she now had other goals. That battle, she said, made her realize how weak she still was. Selena commented that Alicia never changed her mind once she made a decision. Even so, Alicia sincerely thanked her for the intention and the invitation. In a more relaxed tone, Selena asked her to at least take a look at their group members, saying they had a selfish leader, a muscle-brained guy who never spoke, and a 2-meter-tall nerd. She seemed annoyed, saying there were too many men in that group and that it irritated her. Leonis then asked her to shut up, explaining that she was talking too much and making Alicia's partner, Rude, uncomfortable. Rude stood up and started talking about something that had happened in a village in the east when he was a child. No one understood right away what he meant, but he explained that Leonis had saved his life that day. He said that maybe Leonis didn't remember, but at that moment he became his idol. Leonis finally recognized the boy whose life he had saved, praising him for never giving up. Selena was also surprised, saying that this was the boy they had always talked about. She said that Leonis used to say that if they had arrived just a little earlier that day, they could have saved more villagers and that he had always regretted that. The healer explained that this was the reason Leonis was so reckless and caused trouble for the group. Leonis then thanked Rude, saying it was thanks to him that they were able to neutralize the dungeon anomaly, and affirmed that he had become a good adventurer. Rude said he didn't deserve such praise, but still thanked Leonis for his words. Lankars took advantage of the moment and said that, considering the recent problems in the capital and the need to strengthen Bologna's defenses, he was thinking of creating a new guard unit and wanted to know if Rude would accept being the captain. This surprised Rude a lot. He thanked him for the offer, but said he had to decline. Lancarse accepted the refusal and asked if he could know the reason. Rude replied that during the operation in the dungeon, he realized how unprepared he was for a mission like that. Without enough strength, he couldn't protect his friends. He spoke directly to Leonis, saying that he had become an adventurer because he admired the kind of person he was. He confessed that he was far from reaching that level but wanted to become stronger, so that one day they could fight side by side. He also promised Alicia that one day they would conquer the Abyss dungeon. Alicia smiled at hearing that and said she could hardly wait, calling Rude her partner. Lankar sighed, saying he clearly saw that the two had their own goals. Rude explained that he was already planning to leave Bologna to start a new journey, seeking to further evolve his powers. The healer found that fascinating and commented that Rude's magical energy was different from conventional magic. He said that his magical essence seemed to have taken root in the human body, something theoretically impossible, and asked directly if Rude had eaten monsters. This greatly surprised all the adventurers. Selena told everyone to step back, considering Rude dangerous. She threatened him with her ice magic and demanded that he answer immediately if it was true, warning that depending on the answer, he would die. The healer asked for calm and ended up trapping Selena in an earth prison. She was furious, saying that eating monsters was the greatest taboo of all. Therefore, Rude could not be trusted. The healer explained that Rude seemed special because he couldn't detect any signs of monstrification in him. More precisely, there was no trace of darkness in his magical essence, though he still didn't know the reason for that. Leonis apologized to Rude for Selena's rudeness. He explained that their group was hunting the thieves who had stolen the royal vault, and since there were traces of monster essence at the scene, they needed to investigate. He asked Rude to explain the whole situation. The scene changed, and Rude had already told them everything he knew. Leonis then concluded that this was how Rude survived the poisoning, thanks to his status, nullifying ability, which was rare. Another adventurer commented that he had never heard of such an ability before, but now everything made sense. Selena, still surprised, realized that Rude had been the one responsible for dispelling the abyss curse in Alicia, even if it almost killed him. Rude replied that it was fine because he understood her reaction. One of the companions asked Rude if by eating monster meat he could replicate their abilities, but he explained that even if he ate the meat of a fish monster, that didn't mean he would be able to breathe underwater. Leonis then said that Rude could absorb the abilities, but he didn't acquire the monster's physical traits. He then asked if Alicia had ever eaten monster meat with Rude. She responded angrily that she would never do such a thing, saying she would never eat a monster. However, she hid the fact that, deep down, she was curious and even eager to try it. Leonis mentioned he had been wondering if perhaps someone other than Rude could absorb a monster's essence by eating it, and also gain abilities. The others were surprised by the idea. They recalled that eating monsters was a taboo, as doing so could lead someone to turn into a monster. Leonis suggested that they might use substitution magic to reverse the transformation, which shocked everyone. But Rude explained that this wasn't possible, saying there were only two outcomes for someone who ate monsters. Either they turned into a monster or died. Leonis commented that he understood, so instead of transforming, the person might simply die. Rude said that the first time he ate monster meat, he felt an immense surge of mama in his body and completely lost control. At that time, he was consumed by a desire for revenge against everyone who had betrayed him. It was that hatred that kept him conscious and allowed him to move forward. He said that only now were the side effects of that mania starting to fade. Leonis noted that Rude's body had adapted to the magical essence. Rude continued, saying that there was a time when substitution failed. Leonis replied that he understood, acknowledging that they still had much to learn about mana. Another member of the group said that mana wasn't something they could play with right now. Leonis then asked Rude to demonstrate his abilities, stating that he understood the logic, but admitted that there was still much they didn't know about mana. He said that if they truly wanted to understand and master mana, they should talk to the swords, since they were all adventurers. The scene changed and showed some unicorn rabbits hopping through the vegetation. The adventurers prepared to hunt them. Shortly after, the image cut to Rude cooking the rabbits while everyone watched him eat. Celine commented that it seemed a bit unfair to them since they needed to use items or rest to recover mana, while Rude could restore it just by eating. As she spoke, both she and another companion drooled with desire as they watched Rude eat. Rude said he was ready and thanked them for the meal, explaining that he had fully recovered his mana. Leonis asked if he was feeling well after eating that, and Rude replied that there was no need to worry because he felt better than ever. At that moment, a portal appeared before them. It was explained that the so-called secret garden transported those who passed through it to a space filled with plant essence, a place that allowed no outside interference and could only be accessed with the user's permission. They said Rude could enter. As soon as he crossed the portal, he encountered a breathtaking landscape and was told that no one would disturb them there. To test the environment, he cast a fire spell on the grass and saw that it caused no damage, concluding they could fight with everything they had. Leonis then removed his cloak, stating that the duel would begin and asking Rude not to hold back. Rude activated his Morph Slash and launched a powerful wind attack toward Leonis, who grew excited when he realized Rude was using the Morph's ability, confirming that he really could absorb the powers of the monsters he ate. Leonis defended himself firmly and Rude activated his spiderweb, but it was easily cut, and Leonis mocked him, saying that was all he had. Suddenly, Leonis noticed a smoke cloud approaching and recognized the paralyzing breath. Rude appeared behind him trying to land a strike, but Leonis defended himself at the last moment and said Rude had been too naive, because with such predictable tactics he wouldn't be able to even scratch him. They then engaged in a sword duel. Leonis commented that Rude relied too much on the stolen abilities from monsters, which made all his moves shallow. Rude was surprised to realize the paralysis hadn't worked as expected. Leonis explained that the effect had actually occurred, but high-level adventurers had strong resistance to that kind of attack. Rude activated his Iron Body skill and braced for the impact, but even so, he took a direct punch to the chest from Leonis. Leonis explained that many monsters had natural resistance to negative effects and asked Rude not to rely too much on copied abilities. Not giving up, Rude used Instant Step and quickly advanced toward Leonis, but he predicted the movement and countered with a precise kick to Rude's face, knocking him to the ground. Even so, Rude got up, channeled his mana into his sword, and activated Rabbit Leap to gain more momentum. Leonis immediately recognized it as the Unicorn Rabbit skill that Rude had eaten earlier and admitted that he was very talented. Rude then launched an extremely powerful strike. When the smoke cleared, it revealed that Leonis had won the duel without much difficulty. He explained that such spaced and heavy blows might work against giant monsters, but in human combat they rarely hit. Leonis said that while monster abilities were indeed powerful, Rude's combat technique was still very weak. Leonis then helped him up and asked if he had ever heard about mana circulation techniques within the body. He explained that channeling mana properly strengthened physical abilities. Rude focused, trying to remember the sensation Leonis described, and managed to channel his mana correctly. Leonis praised him, saying he learned very quickly. Excited, Rude asked if they could fight once more. Leonis, even more thrilled, agreed to the request and asked Rude to go all out this time. Another adventurer, watching them, just laughed at how excited they were. After a long training session, they returned exhausted. Rude, panting, admitted that he didn't land a single hit, as expected from an S-rank adventurer. Leonis replied that even so, Rude had managed to pressure him several times thanks to his versatility and variety of abilities. Very grateful, Rude sincerely thanked Leonis, saying that during the training he had pointed out all of his weak points and corrected his bad habits, making it feel like he had gone through real training. But the big guy in the group joked that this was just Leonis being weird as always. Leonis in turn replied a bit confused, saying he didn't remember saying anything unusual. Rude thought to himself that it was the first time he had seen that guy speak like that. Another more serious adventurer changed the tone and asked Rude about the habit of eating monsters, asking him not to talk about it with anyone else. He explained that if the royal capital found out, Rude would likely be executed. Hearing this, Rude was terrified. The man went on to explain that the closer to the royal capital, the stronger the influence of the church. And for them, the sacred scriptures were objects of worship that completely forbade eating monsters, considering it the greatest of taboos. Rude tried to argue that his abilities nullified the negative effects of monster meat, but the other adventurer explained that even so, defying the scriptures was considered a terrible sin, and the clerics would never understand his side. He then asked if anyone besides the companions who were in the dungeon knew his secret. Rude answered no, since it was a taboo and he had kept the secret very well, only telling Alicia so far. But at that moment, he remembered one more person, old Doan. The scene then shifted to the dwarf shop, where Doan was holding a giant sword and proudly saying that after so much research, he had finally finished it. The scene showed Doan irritated in the shop, saying he didn't care what others ate, that it was none of his business. Even so, he told Rude to relax and assured him he wouldn't tell anyone the secret. Doan then complained, saying the important thing was that he had been commissioned to make a sword for Rude, and now he was saying he didn't want it anymore. Realizing Realizing he had messed up, Rude apologized for canceling the order. Doan explained that he had forged a special sword, made to withstand even the intense flow of mana, and he was furious because after completing such a difficult task, Rude simply said he didn't want it. Rude saw how angry the dwarf was, and Alicia commented that of course he would be. Doan then calmed down a bit and asked Rude for a favor, saying he would do anything. Blushing and slightly embarrassed, Doan asked if he could at least hold Rude's sword. Doan asked to hold Rude's sword, which made the situation a bit awkward and uncomfortable for the group. Even so, the conversation continued. Rude, embarrassed, explained that he couldn't just let anyone touch his sword. He said his weapon was very large, very powerful, but also carried a dangerous curse that drove anyone who touched it insane. Doan replied that he didn't complain when Rude disregarded all the work he had done, so the least Rude could do was listen to his request, especially since Rude himself had said he would do anything in return. Also, Doan mentioned he had heard that Rude could cure negative states. Rude warned that it was too dangerous because if he lost consciousness when touching the sword, the substitution might not work. Even so, Doan spoke seriously, saying he didn't care, and if it went wrong, Rude could simply cut him down. Rude thought the old man was really crazy but accepted the request after seeing how determined he was. He even asked if Doan was really serious, since until now he believed only Alicia could touch his sword. Doan explained that he had worked for years as a blacksmith in that city and had never seen a weapon capable of absorbing mana or magic like that. For him, it was well worth the risk. With that, Rude handed his sword to Doan, who was amazed to hold it. He examined the metal, saying it was anything but ordinary, and noticed that the darkness within the blade seemed alive. Doan commented that the madness and beauty of the sword coexisted perfectly, and admitted he had never seen anything like it in his life. He was clearly enchanted by the weapon, even saying that one day he would forge something like it. But suddenly, the sword began to influence his mind. Doan heard a dark voice urging him to kill everything around him, and had a vision of Grand Spirit holding a woman with blonde hair. Rude, realizing the danger, quickly took the sword back and activated his substitution ability to free Doan from the effect. He asked if the blacksmith was okay, and Doan replied that he was, apologizing for being so selfish and insisting on that request. Even after recovering, Doan kept reflecting on the illusion he had seen, wondering what it meant. He then said he wouldn't say anything that would hinder the group's progress, so Rude didn't need to worry about it anymore. However, he made it clear that one day he would definitely try to forge a sword that surpassed that one. The story then shifted to a moving carriage. Rude commented that it was very relaxing, although renting a carriage was quite bold for them. Alicia explained that she had been heavily pursued in recent years, so sometimes it was good to relax a little. Rude laughed, saying it was funny to think that Sylphide and Nomia would be driving the carriage. Alicia replied that she could hire someone for that, but considering Rude's eating habits, things might not turn out well. Curious, Rude asked what kind of city Ischia was. Alicia explained that it was the city of the Blue Sea, a lively place known for its abundant fishing and bustling trade. She said there were two major reasons for them to go there. The first was for Rude to obtain new abilities. Near Ischia, there was the Submerged Temple, famous for being filled with unique monsters very different from those found in Bologna. She explained that he would have a chance to acquire several new abilities there. She also mentioned the boss of that place, known as the Scissor King, who used a very powerful ability called Steel Body. Rude wanted to know if Steel Body was a more advanced version of hardening. Alicia confirmed, saying she remembered how difficult it was to deal with such absurd resistance, since not even high-rank adventurers' attacks could penetrate that monster's defense. The second reason for going there was to revive Erdeel. Alicia explained that the submerged dungeon was Erdeel's birthplace, and that to restore her, they needed to go there as soon as possible. Moreover, by completing this task, everyone would become stronger. Rude asked if her spirit hadn't been devoured. Alicia clarified that spirits didn't have a physical form, and even if damaged, they didn't truly disappear. She explained that the plan was to restore her mana in the submerged dungeon to recover all of her original power. Ischia was known for its delicious seafood. During the trip, Alicia asked Rude if, by any chance, August had given something to him when they left Bologna. Rude pulled out a book and asked if that was what she meant. unaware of its content. Alicia explained that it was a diary by someone who researched the habit of eating monsters, and that it could be very useful for Rude. Leonis then said it was time for Rude to shine. At that moment, Rude remembered the moments he spent with the group of heroes who fascinated him so much, and silently said goodbye to them. He sat down deep in thought when Alicia asked if he was planning to go on an adventure with Leonis and the others. Embarrassed, Rude asked what she was talking about. Alicia laughed, finding him very suspicious, and he asked her to give him a little time. The scene changed to a very frightened person sitting on the grass. In front of her, a man was being held by the neck by a monster and desperately told her to run away as fast as possible. When the woman looked back, she saw more monsters approaching. They were demon boars. Then the narrative returned to the book that Rude had, which contained the Count's notes. In the text, he wrote that his research was forbidden, and that he would record all the methods of cooking monsters there. About the slime, he explained that these monsters were common for beginner adventurers, easy to subdue but dangerous to eat. Their bodies contained a powerful acid that, if eaten raw, could dissolve the stomach and lead to death. Therefore, it was necessary to neutralize the acid. For this, the slime should be sautéed in a pan with seaweed lye and left for 2 days. It was also possible to fry it, but the oil splattered a lot and the meat shrank, losing flavor. The best method was to sauté it in boiling water until it turned pink, without letting it shrink, and then cut it into small slices. It was recommended to eat it with salad. The taste was slightly sweet and the texture unique, creating an exceptional experience when combined with the salad's crunch. Alicia commented that this monster recipe book from August would be very useful for Rude. He replied that he could hardly believe such a record existed, since eating monsters was a taboo. Alicia said it was almost a miracle the book had reached him, and suggested that after completing their objectives in Ischia, they could visit the Count. Rude, however, said it wouldn't work out and handed the book to her. Upon reading it, Alicia was startled and shocked, saying it seemed like only Rude could actually eat monsters. They then continued the journey. Alicia explained that once they crossed that forest, they would reach Ischia. Rude was impressed with the forest, and Alicia asked if he had ever heard of the Calamity Dragon. Rude replied that now that she mentioned it, he remembered a story about it, saying it was so powerful it was treated as a natural disaster, something humans couldn't resist, like earthquakes and storms. He said that when he was a child, people used to scare him by saying the Calamity Dragon would get him if he did something wrong. Alicia explained that the forest was famous for being the home of that dragon. Alarmed, Rude asked if it really existed, and Alicia confirmed, saying she had seen it from afar in the past. She remarked that the dragon's appearance was divine, something humans could never surpass. Rude thought that since he was born there had been no reports of that dragon appearing in the world, and if Alicia had seen it, she must be much older than him. Realizing what he was thinking, Alicia said it wasn't polite to calculate other people's age. Suddenly, Sylphide appeared, warning that there were 3 demon boars ahead. Alicia explained that there was no way around and they would have to defeat them to move on. They started the battle, with Alicia casting fireballs and Rude appearing behind the monsters, slicing them in half with his sword. When they looked to the side, they saw the bodies of dead humans on the ground and remarked how brutal it was, even if it was ironic coming from Rude, who had just cut 3 boars in half as if it were normal. He then sat down and explained that anomalies might be happening in the dungeons, saying he himself was the natural predator of those monsters. Now that the Calamity Dragon had vanished, the demon boars were reproducing at an abnormal rate, which made the situation very dangerous. Since they had passed through there was no other choice but to take care of them as soon as possible. Rude used his heat vision and identified between 40 and 50 demon boars. Alicia commented that even though their threat level was low, they were very clever and always acted in groups, so they couldn't let their guard down. She explained that their current position was perfect to avoid a group battle, and that the standard tactic was to reduce the number of enemies all at once. Rude activated his paralyzing breath ability to try to immobilize all the boars at once, and commented that he just needed to get them all in one go. However, he quickly realized the attack hadn't worked. He remembered Leonis's warning that many monsters had resistance to certain effects. To make things worse, the boars had chewed on herbs that nullified paralysis and managed to fully recover. Alicia noticed it wasn't just that. They were also gaining temporary resistance and laughed at Rude, saying his breath had failed. Rude, irritated, replied that he had already figured that out and told her to shut up. At that moment, all the boars charged at him, and Rude said he would turn them into pork ribs. The battle began. Alicia asked if she should use her magic to clear the field, but Rude told her not to as he wanted to test something. He activated his poisonous scales, saying that fighting that way would give him the upper hand. Alicia covered her nose, complaining that if he got too close, she would be affected too. Rude charged at the boars, saying that if paralysis didn't work, then they would have to deal with poison. He started cutting down the monsters, explaining that each movement spread poison from the scales to everyone within range. Although the poison was working well, one of the monsters still managed to attack him from behind. Rude dodged quickly, but that boar activated its command ability, coordinating the group's attack. Alicia then shouted for him to watch out and look up. When Rude looked up, he saw a huge rock falling toward him. He dodged at the last second but wondered where that had come from. He quickly noticed there was a very different boar among the group and wondered what kind of creature it was. Alicia explained it was the Demon Boar King, a monster that normally lived deep within a dungeon and wasn't supposed to appear on the surface. Most likely, this was a consequence of the Calamity Dragon's influence, since the magical concentration in the area had increased. But regardless of the cause, they couldn't allow these monsters to roam free, or the damage would only worsen. Rude then attacked the boars again, saying they could think about that later and that they needed to defeat the Boar King first. He said he didn't have time to waste with the others and told them all to die quickly, slicing them in half without hesitation. The Boar King threw another rock at Rude, but he used his instant step to dodge. He then tried to strike the king, but the monster blocked the attack. At that moment, all the boars surrounded Rude, who commented to himself that it was typical for minions to protect their boss, but that was actually a good thing since he could take them all out at once. He shouted, releasing part of his power, knocking several of them down. Then he activated the negative status of miasma on everyone nearby, which deeply frightened the Boar King. Rude then declared it was his turn, and in that moment, he remembered Leonis's teachings about feeling the mana wrapping around his body. Focused, he managed to block the Boar King's attack with just one hand. He mentally thanked Leonis for that lesson, and then sliced the Boar King in half as if it were nothing, acknowledging that Leonis had made him much stronger. Alicia then commented that it had truly been amazing, and that Rude had defeated the Boar King with a single strike. She asked about the previous ability, wanting to know if it was the miasma wave, and Rude confirmed, explaining that he had acquired it from the miasma dragon and that it was really powerful. Rude explained that the powerful ability had a major flaw. It made him extremely hungry. Alicia asked what that flaw was, and he told her about that annoying side effect. The scene then shifted to later, when Rude had already prepared another dish made with monster meat. Alicia commented that once again he had made something delicious, and Rude explained that he had used notes from the book to season and prepare the meat, saying he couldn't wait to try it. Suddenly, another person showed up, drawn by the smell. To Rude's surprise, it was the same adventurer they had met before. She approached and asked if she could eat with them, calling Rude Mr. Monster-Eating Adventurer. Surprised, Rude asked what she was doing there. She replied that she liked him a lot, and had decided to follow him. She said that back in Abellio she saw him cooking monsters and had already started drooling to try it, saying she hoped it would be really tasty. Without hesitation, she grabbed a piece of monster meat and ate it, leaving Alicia and Rude shocked, unable to believe what she had just done. Alicia said they needed to make the girl vomit immediately. Rude tried to restrain her and asked her to stick her fingers down her throat. The girl, confused, didn't understand the reason for all the panic. Alicia, very nervous, explained that it was because she had eaten monster meat, and if she swallowed it, she could die. The girl, however, replied that she would be fine, which made Rude even more desperate, saying he couldn't allow that. Alicia explained that they were only trying to help her, but the girl was already irritated by the whole situation. Out of patience, she threw Rude and Alicia far away, complaining about how they dared touch her like that. Rude, dazed, wondered what had just happened, while the girl complained that she had barely been able to enjoy the meal because of them. Even after that, she kept eating the monster meat and started behaving strangely, making Rude and Alicia even more worried. Alicia wondered if that crazy girl was turning into a monster, and Rude said he needed to try the substitution technique on her as soon as possible. But suddenly, the girl let out a cry of satisfaction, saying it was the most delicious thing she had ever eaten. Rude and Alicia were completely confused. Rude asked what was going on, saying he couldn't sense the mana from the ingredients and that apparently she was completely fine. With that, Alicia started to feel like eating it too, but the girl explained that it wasn't selfishness on her part, they simply couldn't eat monsters. She asked if they knew what happened when a human ate monster meat. Alicia asked why, then, she was eating it. The girl replied saying that she had said humans can't eat monsters, but that for a monster like her, it was totally normal. Rude, surprised, asked what she meant by being a monster, and the girl confirmed it. Rude then activated his analysis ability to check who she was, but the result showed she was human. Confused, Rude told her the result. The girl apologized, saying she had forgotten to undo her disguise and asked him to analyze her again. This time, Rude was in shock, stepped back, and told Alicia to get away as quickly as possible. Alicia, very frightened, asked what had happened, and Rude explained that the thing in front of them was the Calamity Dragon. His analysis system clearly showed it. Alamira, monster race, Calamity Dragon. Alicia was terrified, saying she couldn't believe it. Alamira, on the other hand, praised the pork ribs, saying they were fantastic and more delicious than any other monster she had eaten. Rude asked what her purpose was there, and Alamira answered that he could relax, that she wasn't going to eat them or anything like that. Alicia asked why a high-ranked being like her was disguised as a human. Alamira explained that she didn't have a special reason. She was just curious about Rude's mana and decided to get closer. To her surprise, he was a monster eater. She said she became fascinated by the monster food he made and couldn't resist following him. Faced with all that, Rude and Alicia didn't even know what to say. Alamira explained that there was a den of demon boars nearby, and that as soon as she moved away from the forest, they started reproducing uncontrollably, which she found disgusting. Even so, she said that meat was especially tasty and was probably from a demon boar, explaining that the higher the monster's level, the denser its magic, and the more intense the flavor. Rude thought she was like a gourmet specialized in monster meat. Alamira mentioned they would need to hunt the leader of the demon boar den so that Rude could prepare a good meal. Seeing no other choice, Rude agreed with her, while Alicia could only think about how she had devoured all that monster meat so quickly. Alamira said it was settled and asked them to wait a moment, but Alicia asked Alamira to take them with her, saying she didn't seem to be lying and asking if they could at least watch the fight because they needed to get stronger as quickly as possible. Alamira thought it was an interesting idea and agreed to let them go with her. On the way, Rude commented that she seemed more relaxed, and Alamira replied that after revealing her true identity, there was no point in pretending anymore. She said they were almost there. They soon arrived in front of a door, and Alamira said she would show them the reason she was called the Calamity Dragon. Rude asked what it was, and Alicia said she had never seen anything like it and suspected even the guild didn't know about it. Alamira explained that the source of the foul smell in her territory seemed to come from there, and that she wanted to save mana at that moment. When she opened the door, she showed a treasure chest full of ingredients. Alicia said the number of monsters there was normal, and Rude offered to help Alamira immediately. Smiling, she declined, saying she didn't need help because Rude was the one who would cook to restore the mana she would use there. At that moment, Alamira partially transformed into a dragon. Just her presence was enough to make the boars already appear defeated. She commented that since she had eaten something delicious that day, she would make an exception. Then she activated her destructive breath ability, unleashing such a powerful blast that it devastated everything in the dungeon, obliterating anything in its path. Both Alicia and Rude were shocked by her power. Alamira commented that it had been a long time since she had released such a large blast. In a lighter tone, she told Rude that now they would prepare some demon boar king ribs. Rude asked her to wait, saying that even though he wanted to cook, she had turned the monster's body into ashes. Alamira became irritated for not being able to control herself, but soon smelled something different. She told Rude to cheer up because the boss was still alive on the lower floor. She asked them to go down quickly. When they descended, they found a gigantic door, which Alamira kicked open. They then came face to face with the Emperor Demon Boar. Alamira commented that it was a fine specimen of an ingredient and that to preserve its quality, she would go easy on it this time. She observed that the boar's mana control was amateurish and told Rude to pay attention, explaining that this was how to use mana fusion in combat. When the boar charged, Alicia asked Alamira to be careful, but Alamira punched the monster in the face with such force that it left Rude speechless. Then, to finish it off, she kicked the boar in the stomach, sending it flying. They were both amazed by her strength. Alamira then told Rude it was time to prepare the meal. The scene shifted to Rude cooking, and he prepared Emperor Demon Boar steak and ribs for everyone. Alamira was very excited, saying she was finally going to eat, and had been waiting for this for a long time. When she tasted the food Rude prepared, she said it was delicious, and that she could feel her mana returning completely to her body, with a much more efficient absorption than when eating raw meat. Rude asked if it was really that good, but Alamira replied that he, being an amateur, wouldn't understand and would need to train much more to grasp what she meant. Meanwhile, Alicia felt frustrated because she was the only one who couldn't eat monster meat. Next, Alamira asked Rude why he didn't join her, which startled Alicia. Alamira explained that if he became her cook, she could teach him how to control his mana. Rude admitted it was a very good offer, but said it was all too sudden for him. Alamira then commented that she could smell the wise dragon coming from Rude's backpack, saying he was so afraid of the side effects that he hadn't even eaten it yet. She thought it was a waste, considering it was such an incredible species. Rude was surprised she had noticed, and Alamira asked if he remembered what had happened to his body during that battle. Rude explained that to recover mana, he ate the wise dragon's egg and felt an intense surge of mana coursing through his body, an overwhelming wave of energy that made him stop being himself for a moment. Alamira confirmed that was exactly it. His body couldn't fully adapt to that violent mana and said it was strange, since with his status nullification ability that shouldn't have been possible. She then suggested he try cooking and eating that meat, saying that if he lost control, she could subdue him again. But she warned that actually being able to absorb all that power would depend on him alone. Rude wondered if he should try it, but he didn't even have time to think properly before he had already roasted the wise dragon's meat. Alamira remarked that it looked really delicious. Rude, still hesitant, admitted it really did look good, but asked if she was sure it was safe to eat and if it wouldn't be like last time. Alamira told him to relax. She explained that mana, just like magic for humans, was rooted in the monsters' bodies, and that when humans absorbed it, their bodies would tend to reject it since they weren't made for it. That was when mutations or even death would occur. She said Rude's ability suppressed those two outcomes and, to be more precise, she herself had altered his body. She explained she had only nullified the mutations that would make him lose his humanity, allowing him to accept other mutations and adapt to the mana. She told him his body was still evolving at that moment, and that in its current state, it didn't yet have what it took to completely absorb that mana. She then asked if, the first time he ate monster meat, he had felt something similar. Rude confirmed that he had, remembering he had completely lost his sanity. Alicia commented that he hadn't been able to adapt to that overwhelming amount of mana, and that as his level increased and he kept eating monsters, he might eventually adapt fully, though no one knew when that would happen. Alamira said there was another way. If his body couldn't handle it, he could compensate with technique. She explained this technique was similar to the mana manipulation he had already learned, and that he might already have the basics for it. She said what remained was learning to manipulate the mana that exceeded his body's capacity. She offered to help him with that process. The two held hands, and Alamira asked him to release the mana from his own body and then cover himself with that released mana. Rude was amazed, saying it was an incredible power, completely different from what he knew, but his body couldn't handle it at that moment. He ended up letting go of her hand. Alamira told him always to remember that feeling coursing through his body, saying that this meal would be good training for him too. Alicia thought that technique was incredible, something no human she knew possessed. Finally, Alamira told everyone to stop talking because she wanted to eat already. Alicia, disappointed, asked if she had to eat too. Alamira replied that of course she was going to eat, and that was the whole reason they were there. Rude, still uneasy, said he would eat too, so the two of them began eating the wise dragon's meat. Alamira commented that the meat was very good, and that even though she was from the dragon race, she didn't mind eating one of them. She thought to herself that, as expected from a true dragon, even if it was just a newborn, the quality of that mana was extremely intense and very rare. Silently, she wondered if Rude would be able to withstand all that power. Rude was impressed by what he was feeling. There was a surge of power running through his body, something truly incredible. He wondered if he would be able to keep control of that energy and concluded that for now, he was managing, he noticed he had absorbed several abilities: telekinesis, divine annihilation strike, paralysis resistance, and earth splitter. In addition, he had obtained the Eye of Wisdom. However, suddenly Rude put his hand to his head, feeling an intense pain. Thousands of images began flooding his mind in a confusing way. He questioned what was happening, trying to figure out if it was a hallucination, but he realized it couldn't be, since his status nullification would have activated if it was. He kept wondering what those so vivid images were. At that moment, the image of the wise dragon appeared in his mind, calling him a filthy human and saying it wouldn't allow him to keep using its eye. Then the wise dragon destroyed the Eye of Wisdom, making Rude lose that ability. Elysia noticed something was wrong and asked if he was okay. Rude said he was, but explained he had failed to acquire an ability. Halimira commented that not even he had managed to withstand that power, explaining that the Eye of Wisdom was a unique ability of that dragon. She said this ability let the user copy techniques just by looking and also see glimpses of the future. Halimira said she believed he could handle that power, but realized that even Rude couldn't withstand the interference of a pure dragon. She told him to relax, saying that failing to acquire an ability wasn't something bad or a negative status. Rude, still frustrated, said she could have at least warned him beforehand. But Halimira changed the subject and asked if he had decided whether he would join her so she could teach him how to control mana. She asked if he would allow her to officially join his team. Rude, confused by the images he had seen earlier, was trying to figure out if they were memories of the past or visions of the future. It was said that even if the body perished, wisdom accumulated in the soul and had the power to show even the future. Reflecting on this, Rude answered that he would accept forming a team with Halimira, since if he wanted to get stronger, he would need her power. He also acknowledged that this power could help Elysia a lot. Halimira was happy with his decision, saying everything was settled. They touched hands to seal the agreement. But Elysia, suspicious, warned that she wouldn't forgive Halimira if she tried anything strange. Halimira, smiling, asked why elves were so distrustful. Back on the road, Elysia commented that she could already see their destination ahead. Rude was impressed by the view. They finally arrived at the port city of Ischia, a prosperous place. It was Rude's first time visiting, and he was amazed by the liveliness and energy the maritime trade brought to the city. Rude suggested they go straight to the guild to get the mission for the submerged dungeon, but Elysia said it wasn't a good idea. She explained that outsider adventurers needed to start with simpler missions to earn the guild's recognition. Besides, the way they were now, it would be very hard to conquer the submerged dungeon. The scene shifted to the interior of the Ischia Adventurers Guild. Elysia pointed to a starter mission, saying it seemed like the best choice for them at that moment. While they were reviewing it, two adventurers approached and asked if they were newbies. Their group seemed low level and pretty unprepared. They looked at Halimira and mocked her, asking who that little girl was and saying adventuring wasn't child's play. They told her to go home to play with mommy and daddy, saying it would be much safer that way. At that moment, another man in the group intervened, telling his companions to stop. He apologized for their rude behavior, explaining they were always ill-mannered. The others complained, asking who said he was their boss. He replied that if they wanted to tarnish the name of the White Wave Blades, he'd handle the situation himself. They called the blonde man Alan, who took control of the conversation to calm things down and avoid more trouble in the guild. One of the men in the rival group held a knife and asked Rude if he wanted to try his luck. But another friend told him to stop, saying they were causing a scene in front of too many people and their boss wouldn't be happy about it. Glenn complained, calling the other a buzzkill, and said they were leaving right away, taunting them by saying weaklings like Rude were only good for monster bait. Halimira asked Rude if she could burn them and eat them afterward, but he asked her to calm down. At that moment, Alan bowed and apologized on behalf of his companions, saying they were really hard to deal with. Rude told him not to worry, saying adventures like that existed everywhere. Alan asked if they were new in town, and Rude confirmed that they had just arrived. Then Alan introduced himself as a member of the White Wave Blades and welcomed them to Ischia. Rude also introduced himself, saying his name. Alan noticed the paper in Elysia's hand and was surprised to see it was a mission to subdue an earth blue shark. Elysia confirmed it, explaining that since they had just arrived in town, they thought they'd start with something like that. Alan said he understood, but warned that even though it wasn't a very difficult mission, it required a boat because it was at sea. Elysia asked if they should rent a boat, and Alan offered to lend them his to make up for his friend's rudeness. He even offered to accompany them. since sea missions could be complicated for those who weren't used to them. But Alamira declined, saying they didn't need it. Alan said it was fine and that he just wanted to apologize for the trouble his group had caused. He said it was really important to form teams with people you could trust to watch your back. Finally, he said he'd prepare the boat at the port and wished them a safe journey, hoping the ocean spirits would bless them. The scene then shifted to the three of them already sailing on the boat. Alicia remarked that they were really lucky to have gotten the boat. Rude said Alan was really nice to them, but Alamira complained that the boat was very mediocre. Alicia, annoyed, told her to stop whining, reminding her they were almost at the hunting area. Alicia then called Rude over to talk. She activated her water spirit blessing of Erndel to allow him to breathe underwater, but realized it didn't work as she suspected. Rude's abnormal status nullification prevented the effect. Alicia explained that they normally use that magic to breathe during underwater battles. Rude said it wasn't a problem, since he had the high-speed swimming ability. He told the two of them to wait, and jumped into the water, saying that since the mission was low rank, he'd be back soon. Alamira, watching this, commented that he was really very interesting. Rude, already in the water, tied a rope around his waist and swam quickly, locating the earth blue shark. The monster had abilities like water bullet, current, amphibious, and aquatic pressure resistance. While planning the hunt, Rude thought about how he would prepare the shark dish, whether he'd make sashimi or fry it, but decided to cook it Meunier style. The shark noticed his presence and lunged at him. On the boat, Alamira wondered if Rude would be okay, but decided that monster wasn't all that threatening. Alicia explained that if anything happened, he'd send a signal by tugging the rope so they could pull him back. She believed it would be very easy for him. At that moment, Alamira noticed something floating in the water and was surprised. She looked more closely and realized it was a water horse, a very rare creature. She also noticed it had already registered their presence and thought its swimming ability seemed very useful. Rude realized they needed to capture that horse as quickly as possible. At that moment, the horse cast a powerful water spell in their direction, but Rude managed to block the attack using his wind magic. Alicia explained that it used aquatic principle magic and that they had to capture it because Rude could eat its meat and gain very good abilities. Alamira got even more excited and activated her dragon mode, saying that today's dish would be horse meat. She spoke in a scary way, even saying she'd suck the marrow from its bones, which made Alicia tell her to calm down because she was scaring the horse. Alamira then commented that he was very clever and noticed her power, which was why he tried to flee. Even so, she assured them she wouldn't let it escape and told Alicia to get ready to go after it. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the sea, Rude was fighting sharks. He wanted to carry one of the sharks he'd just taken down, but their wave attacks were very fast and hard to dodge. Suddenly, he felt the rope pull him back forcefully and didn't understand what was happening. Alamira apologized for moving him so quickly, explaining they had found a rare monster up ahead. Rude complained that he was just about to finish off the sharks, but Alamira said the earth blue shark could wait and told him to look at what they were chasing. He was surprised to see it was a horse, and Alamira explained it had the perfect ability for him at that moment and also looked very tasty. The horse cast another water spell at them, but Rude used his sword to completely absorb the attack. He got excited, saying he really wanted that ability. Alamira told him to hurry as much as possible. When she looked back, she noticed the sharks were following them. Even so, she said to leave the sharks alone and not to lose sight of the horse. They saw the horse flee to a small island and decided to follow. When they arrived, they ran across the sand. Rude mentally apologized to the shark he'd wanted to capture before, knowing he'd have to leave it for later. But something unexpected happened. The sharks started running across the sand, which surprised Rude when he realized they weren't normal sharks. Rude stopped and told Alamira and Alicia to take care of the horse on their own because he'd stay behind to fight the sharks. Alicia agreed without any trouble, but Alamira wasn't too happy about being given orders. Rude commented that those sharks had interesting abilities and activated his mana circulation, covering his body. One of the sharks jumped and bit his arm, but Rude already had his iron body ability active and managed to kill the shark on land. He thought he was starting to get the hang of using mana, and that his abilities were getting stronger. When the other shark tried to flee, Rude didn't let it and used the air blade ability, slicing the animal in half. Meanwhile, Alicia and Alamira were completely lost because the horse had disappeared. Alamira insisted it wouldn't get away from her and heard a sound in the bushes, realizing it was there. To their surprise, there was more than one horse. Alamira thought things had gotten complicated. Alicia warned that they were approaching, and when all the horses attacked at once, she quickly activated Nomia and created a platform that lifted them into the air. Alamira praised Alicia's move and said she could now attack them all at once. Alicia launched several stone shards at the horses, which disintegrated into nothing but drops of water. They realized all those horses were fakes. Alamira was irritated, finding it reckless that they'd tried to trick her like that. She then detected the real horse again and lunged at it. Even though it tried to escape, it couldn't get away because Alamira was already right next to it, relentless. Alamira prepared to punch, saying the horse was very slow, and landed such a powerful blow on it that the impact could be seen even from the beach. Soon after, Rude appeared carrying a shark's body and asked if everything had gone well. The two of them confirmed it had. Alamira commented excitedly that he had finally arrived because it was time to eat. Rude then started preparing the food. He cooked the shark meat and made an aquatic stew with the horse meat. They sat down to eat and said the horse's taste was really good. Rude said that at first he'd thought about making horse sashimi, but it wouldn't be as good raw. He noticed the meat's properties changed a lot when cooked. Alicia said she was starting to get hungry and asked if Rude had acquired a new ability. Rude said yes, explaining he had gained several abilities like walking on water, aquatic magic principles, tidal current, and adaptation to water and land. He got up to test his new abilities and tried to activate the adaptation to water and land. However, nothing happened at that moment, and he complained that it had failed. Alicia told him to calm down and look more carefully. Then he noticed gills had formed on his cheeks, and his hand had also transformed, adapted for the sea. Excited, Rude ran off saying he was going to swim for a bit. Alicia commented worriedly, asking if he wouldn't end up turning into a monster that way, but Alamira calmly replied that he'd be fine since he wasn't exactly human anyway. Meanwhile, Rude swam happily in the sea, finding everything amazing because he could finally breathe underwater and move easily there. In a moment of quiet, he saw a gigantic whale appear before him. Impressed, he thought he'd been born inland and never imagined he'd one day be able to swim in the sea. He reflected that traveling with companions was maybe what people meant by happiness. The scene shifted to Alan, who was surprised to see they had not only defeated the shark, but also captured the water horse. Rude thanked him for his help. Alicia invited Alan to eat with them as thanks for lending the boat. Alan tried to refuse, saying he hadn't really done anything, but Alicia insisted, practically begging him to accept, saying she wanted to visit a place with a good drink. Alan ended up happily agreeing. The scene changed again, this time to inside a bar. Alicia commented that the place was very nice. Glenn and his friend were there. Glenn taunted the group, saying they were acting as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the food was already served on the table for Rude and his friends. Alicia was excited, saying everything looked delicious, but Alamira didn't show any satisfaction at all. Alan explained that the city was very prosperous in fishing and that the fresh seafood was the local pride. Alicia praised the food, saying everything was very tasty, but Alamira remarked that despite the good ingredients and proper preparation, something was still missing. Alan joked that Alamira seemed very gourmet, but Alicia corrected him, explaining that she was just very picky about food. She even nudged Alamira to get her to stop criticizing so much. Alamira complained that she was just saying what she thought. Then Alan asked what they were doing in Ischia. Rude explained that they planned to challenge the Temple of the Submarine Maiden to collect materials from the floor boss, and finally heal Alicia's child. When he saw Alicia's magic, Alan was impressed, noticing it was a spirit, and was amazed that someone so young could command it. Alamira quickly corrected him, saying Alicia wasn't young at all, since she had lived 3 times longer than everyone at that table. She then put more food in her mouth, saying she was eating her second serving. At that moment, Glenn kicked their table, knocking all the food to the floor. He apologized, saying it was an accident and that his foot slipped. Alan immediately stood up and asked them to stop tormenting the group. Glenn said Alan had no right to order him around and questioned why he was flirting with other girls. Alan explained that their blades were sharp to protect the weak and asked if he had forgotten the guild's ideals. Glenn replied that the founders' ideals had long been forgotten and said that if Alan didn't like their attitude, he could just leave. Alan tried to calm things down, asking them not to provoke anyone anymore, saying he had given his all for the guild and wouldn't let them stain its reputation. Even so, the other men made it clear they had never liked him. Alicia then stood up and asked them to stop. She reminded them that guild fights happened all the time, but they were in a tavern and that it was too much for that setting. She explained that just as groups have group rules, taverns have tavern rules. Glenn asked what she meant. The scene shifted and everyone was sitting with beer mugs. Alicia explained that if they wanted to fight in a tavern, they would have to compete in a drinking contest. Alamira thought it was fun, while Rude suspected that Alicia just wanted an excuse to drink. Alicia said the loser would have to obey the winner. Glenn commented that he didn't really get it but saw it as the perfect chance to get rid of Alan, and the others agreed, making it clear that was exactly what they intended, eyeing Alicia with ulterior motives. Glenn accepted and reminded Alan that taverns had their own rules, asking if he was going to follow them and saying that since they were challenged, they would regret it. A mustache man said it was a pity for them since in town they called him Demon Pig Drunk because he never got drunk from any drink or on any ship, asking them to at least entertain him. Alamira and Alicia accepted the challenge and shouted for Rude to give the signal to start. After a while, 3 men were completely passed out while Alicia and Alamira remained steady. A man watching was surprised, commenting that the drink had about 3 times the normal alcohol content and that not everyone could handle something like that. Alicia praised Alamira, saying she was really good, and Alamira replied that Alicia was amazing too, and that her respect for her only grew. Even after winning, the two kept drinking. Rude tried to warn them that everyone was already on the floor, but Alamira called him a brat and said he needed to appreciate the taste of the drink. A man wondered if those two could handle the famous Dragon Chia beer, 100 times stronger than normal. Without thinking much, Alamira grabbed the mug from his hand and even forced Rude to drink. Everyone was shocked to see him drinking that legendary beverage in quantities that could kill a normal person. However, the drunkenness effect was cancelled by one of Rude's abilities, and he then asked everyone to stop fooling around. Everyone was impressed that he wasn't drunk and called him a monster. Alamira grumbled, saying drinking with him was really boring. When she tasted the drink, she was surprised by the flavor, considering it the best she had ever had, and banged on the table demanding that he drink more. Rude, already embarrassed, apologized to everyone and announced that the drinking contest was over. He said goodbye and left carrying Alan, who had passed out. Later, already on the beach, Alan woke up wondering what ability Rude had used on him and whether it could really work like that. Rude said explaining it was too complicated but that he didn't need to worry. Alicia told Alan not to overthink it and commented that the drinking had been really fun. Alan ended up asking if she had done all that just to stop the fight in the tavern. Helen mentioned that she had lived twice as long as he had but had never lost a drinking match in her life. She replied that since she had won, things should calm down, as she didn't like it when a good meal was ruined. Alan then apologized for causing so much trouble for them. Rude said that if he didn't mind, he could tell them what had happened, so maybe he could help. Alan explained that about 6 years earlier, a monster had appeared in the village where he grew up. He wasn't there at the time, so he survived, but his entire family was killed and he became an orphan. Back then, the founder of the White Wave Blades took him in, and he remembered well the teachings that their blades were sharp to protect the weak. He said he'd been taken in at a desperate time, and that gave him the strength to keep fighting monsters. The guild was his emotional support during that phase, but that only lasted up to a point. The scene then shifted to 6 years earlier, in the underwater dungeon temple. Alan's group was there killing some monsters. A man with an eye patch praised another member for improving a lot, but the man with a scar on his mouth complained not to be treated like a child. Suddenly, they heard a very loud noise and were confused about what it was. They quickly realized that a group of Sahajin was approaching, drawn by the smell of the monster's blood they had killed. They saw they were cornered, with no way out. The man with the eye patch ordered everyone to run, saying he would stay behind to buy time. Alan tried to protest, but he insisted, saying he would definitely come back alive. Glenn told Alan to shut up and just run, while another man with a mustache dragged him away. The man with the eye patch shouted for them not to look back and to swim with all their strength. Alan said that man never came back. Without the original leader, the guild was taken over by the young and ambitious Glenn. From then on, everyone started doing whatever they wanted. The original members became disillusioned and eventually left. Elisha commented that when a leader changes, the entire organization changes too. People have only two options: accept the new rules or leave. Alan agreed that might be true for some, but said that at that time he only wanted to protect his group. That was why he was still in the guild, believing that deep down those people were good. He admitted he had drunk too much and was talking too much, so he apologized to Rude's group. He explained that he didn't have much more to say and just wanted to give them some advice, not to challenge that underwater dungeon. He revealed that the temple's underwater dungeon was actually the stronghold of the White Wave Blade. Elisha protested, saying it was unacceptable for a group to monopolize an entire dungeon. Alan replied that in the city they behaved themselves because of public scrutiny, but inside the dungeons they showed their fangs without mercy. He admitted that, pathetic as it sounded, there was nothing he could do about it. Rude thanked him for the warning but made it clear they had their own goals, which included getting stronger. Meanwhile, someone was secretly watching them. The scene then shifted to a man punching Glenn in the face, calling him an idiot for allowing outsiders to feel so comfortable. Glenn apologized, saying it wouldn't happen again. They were on their way to the temple's underwater dungeon, and the man made it clear he would never allow outsiders to disrespect the guild. Glenn tried to say they would handle it themselves, but the man insisted he would go too, because he had recently obtained something very good. He wanted to make everyone regret having humiliated them. The scene shifted to the entrance of the underwater temple. Rude asked if Elisha had ever been there before. She said she had, but it was a long time ago. The dungeon inside had probably changed a lot, so they couldn't let their guard down at any moment. Rude asked if that guild hadn't already occupied the place the first time she was there. As she remembered, she vaguely confirmed it. Almira, mocking, commented that it was to be expected from an S-rank group, since Elisha barely remembered. At that moment, the guild appeared. The man in front asked why they were talking so freely, making it clear that this was White Wave Blade territory and they couldn't do whatever they wanted there. Elisha explained that they were already registered with the guild, so there was no reason to reprimand them. However, the man said that they were the ones who made the rules there, and that the group seemed to need a painful lesson to understand that. Meanwhile, Rude noticed some scars on Alan's face and declared that their blades never broke as long as it was to protect the weak. The man reacted with disdain, asking what he was saying. Rude replied that if the founder could see what he had become, he would be very disappointed. The man became enraged, called Rude a bastard, and ordered everyone to attack him. Almira asked if Rude needed help, but he said it was fine. He then channeled mana into his fist, and when the enemy tried to strike first, Rude punched him straight in the face. Glenn tried to grab him from behind, but Rude ducked and struck him under the chin, throwing him into the air. A man with a spear rushed at him, but Rude dodged and kicked the leader in the face. After knocking everyone down, Rude asked if that was all they had. The leader got up surrounded by a yellow aura, swearing he would never forgive him. He channeled all his power into the spear and declared it would be the end of Rude. As he launched the attack, there was a huge explosion. Glenn commented that this was their boss's power and no one could survive that technique. But when the dust settled, Rude had his sword against the boss's neck, saying that with such wide openings he would never land a hit. Everyone in the guild was shocked by Rude's strength, and he then told the man to give up because he wasn't at his level. The boss called Alan and Karst, ordering them to help. The two looked confused, not knowing what to do. Rude told Alan that this wasn't the kind of group he had dreamed of being in. Alan, frozen, began to remember his master's words, saying their blades were forged to protect the weak. In a low voice, Alan said to Grons that their blades weren't made for this. Almira taunted, asking how long he planned to keep fooling himself, and told Rude to end the fight already. Elisha commented that Alan's problem was having to deal with all that alone. Almira complained that if they considered themselves adventurers, they should stop wasting time and start training. Rude then walked past Alan, who remained motionless, and his group entered the dungeon. Gran still shouted that they would pay for what they had done. Elisha remarked that they had finally entered the dungeon, but warned that from then on, everything would be underwater. Elisha activated her water spirit blessing ability, allowing everyone to breathe and move normally in the submerged environment. Rude activated his aquatic adaptation, ready for the mission, and reflected on the monsters they would encounter. Elisha jumped into the water, and Rude was impressed by the underwater view, but she reminded him it wasn't the time to get distracted because there was still a lot ahead. She said their welcome gift had already arrived, pointing to a level 32 sea monster ahead. The monster launched an attack in their direction. Rude and Alicia managed to dodge, but Alamira was left behind. However, they saw that Alamira had stopped the monster's blow with just one arm. She said she liked the attack, but it wasn't worth dodging, and then unleashed a strike so strong that it exploded the creature's head. She told Rude it was time to prepare a feast. But suddenly, she was caught by a monster that had been hiding underground. Before it could completely grab her, she managed to break free and commented that the enemy had been camouflaged and she hadn't seen it coming. Soon after, another monster appeared behind her to attack. Rude activated his fast swimming ability and, with his sword, decapitated the monster, saving Alamira. Rude said that at least this time he had managed to arrive in time. Alicia warned Alamira not to be so reckless, reminding her that the dungeon was full of aquatic monsters and dangerous traps. Even so, Alamira replied that when those monsters showed up, they were nothing special. She crushed and tore off the tentacles of the monster that had come from underground, and told Rude she thought it would taste good. Then she started yelling at him, demanding he start cooking immediately because she was very hungry. Meanwhile, at the bar, Gron swore he would not forgive those bastards and wondered where they were now. Cart said they seemed to be resting on the second floor of the dungeon. He explained he could see that because he shared the vision of a fish he used as a spy familiar. Grans commented that the second floor was home to the evil shell camouflages, creatures that trapped people with their tentacles and slowly injected poison. The mustached man warned that if anyone got too close, they would be captured and poisoned. Glenn remarked that no ordinary adventurer could survive a trap like that. Gran said it was no problem since that dungeon was their territory. He declared they would take a shortcut using one of their secret routes. Glenn reminded him that the other paths were full of sea monsters, but the mustached man said there was no way to avoid that if they wanted to move forward. That was when Grans revealed the object he was holding, a blue sphere called Abyssal Forest, a first-level divine relic that allowed the user to command sea monsters. Glenn asked how he had gotten something so valuable, and Grans replied that he had stolen it from an adventurer who had passed by the day before. He declared that, with it in hand, he could use the monsters to crush their enemies. Everyone at the bar started laughing, saying that was their boss. Cards asked Alan if he was okay. Alan said he was fine, but inwardly thought that Blue Pearl should have been locked away in the royal capital's treasure vault and wondered what the hell it was doing there. Grans then asked if everyone was ready, saying it was time to show them the terror of the White Wave blades. The group began descending into the underwater dungeon. Glenn commented that the orb had ridiculous power because no monsters attacked them. Grans confirmed this, saying it was even stronger than he had imagined, and remarked that the place would probably work for the plan. He then asked Galt to hand over the prisoner he was holding. Galt grabbed the man, punched him in the head, and threw him down. The man's blood immediately attracted other monsters. Grans observed that the Sahajin's eyes changed color when they smelled the blood, and that now an entire swarm would head that way. He explained that blood from that kind of creature drove the Sahajin into a frenzy, making them form large attack groups. He pointed at Alan, saying he knew this better than anyone, and that when Rude's group arrived, they would be attacked by a pack of Sahajin. He said that no matter how strong they were, they would not escape unscathed. Alan then remembered everything that had happened to his master, and got furious with Grans, questioning why he was doing something so cruel. He thought that adventurers shouldn't fight among themselves, and that Isaac would be disappointed to see what the guild had become. Grans, irritated, grabbed Alan by the neck, told him never to mention that name again, and threw him violently against the wall. He said he didn't care about the old leader anymore, and that he was the one in charge of the guild now. Glenn asked Alan why he was so stubborn, and why he didn't just give up on that guild. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to Rude, who had already cooked the new dish made of butterfried hammerhead, fish, and evil-shelled crab. Alamira asked if that was a butterfry, and Rude confirmed it, saying it was one of his best dishes. He mentioned that Alicia was still creating a special space on the sea floor, and she replied that her spirits made it look easy. If her deal were at her full strength, she would surely have created a space 10 times bigger than the one they were in. Rude was glad he could use fire at that moment since they were cooking and said it helped a lot. Even so, he asked them not to worry too much about it, because they would soon restore her true form. Alicia was worried about something else. The most important thing for her was that if Rude didn't hurry up with the food, Alamira would eat everything by herself. In that lighter mood, Rude opened his bag and said he had something before continuing. He took out a special lunchbox he had prepared the night before. He explained that Alicia was always watching them eat with such longing that he was starting to feel uncomfortable seeing her drooling from the smell. Alamira agreed, saying Alicia was always drooling. When Alicia realized the lunchbox had been made especially for her, she was very happy and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. So they all went back to eating together, sharing the moment as a group. After the meal, Rude discovered he had acquired 3 new abilities: Iron Head, Mimicry, and Venomous Stinger. He told the group that now that he had these new skills, he could go down to the next floor of the dungeon more safely. As they descended to the next level, Alicia remembered something important. She explained about the monsters called Sahajin, which were semi-humanoid, very intelligent, and dangerous. She said they would start appearing from that level onward. Alicia explained that these monsters attacked in a coordinated way, had blows strong enough to pierce even armor, and asked everyone to be very careful. Rude reflected that even his iron body might not withstand attacks from those monsters. Alicia explained that normally they appeared in groups of 3, but warned that if they ran into a swarm, even experienced adventurers might not survive. He thanked her a lot for the information, saying that knowing it in advance helped immensely. To calm him down a bit, Alicia mentioned that it was actually pretty rare to find large groups of those monsters, so he didn't need to worry too much. She then opened the door so they could keep exploring the next floor. But as soon as the door opened, they saw that there were many Sahajin waiting for them. Rude panicked when he realized there weren't just 3 but a much larger number. Alicia was also very startled, saying it was impossible and that they needed to retreat immediately. Meanwhile, Alamira didn't seem worried at all. She simply stepped into the room full of monsters. Rude was shouting that they needed to run as fast as possible and asked what Alamira was thinking. But she answered coldly and strategically, saying they needed to think smart because she would handle making that swarm stop being a problem. At that moment, Alamira transformed her hands and legs into dragon parts. Instead of feeling fear, she taunted the monsters to come at her all at once. When the Sahajin charged to attack, she delivered such a powerful punch that it caused a strange effect, leaving Rude and Alicia not quite understanding what had just happened. Alicia insisted that they needed to retreat, but Alamira stayed calm. She told them not to worry anymore and not to panic, assuring them they could just follow her. Right after that, a huge tornado formed, lifting all those monsters. Then there was an explosion that defeated them all with incredible ease. Alamira remarked that the fight had been good exercise after their meal. Rude was impressed by her strength and said she was truly amazing. Alamira confidently replied that her right hook was definitive and deadly. She picked up a piece of meat from one of the defeated monsters and said she had already prepared the next step, handing the extra ingredients to Rude. Alicia, however, was serious and pointed out that it was still very strange they had found an entire band of Sahajin waiting for them right at the entrance, indicating that something was very wrong there. Alamira agreed it seemed like they hadn't left any tracks and that the monsters had used a clever trick to ambush them. Rude commented that he already knew Alamira was strong but that power was unbelievable. She answered that, compared to her enhanced power, that was nothing. Hearing this, Rude was surprised and said that if it was true, he needed to get stronger as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the deeper layers of the dungeon, the guild group was outside the floor boss's room. Cart started shouting desperately. The boss asked what had happened, and he explained, panicked, that the Sahajin swarm had been completely wiped out by a single girl. Everyone was extremely scared, unable to believe something like that could be true. The group's leader, seeing the situation, commented that it wasn't actually that bad, since it would have been far worse if they all died there pointlessly. With a strategic air, he opened a large door, revealing that he had a plan to solve everything at once. He intended to unleash a giant monster on the intruders, trusting it would eliminate them without difficulty. Galt was impressed and said that creature was insane. Grans, for his part, proudly explained that he was the master of that dungeon, and that no matter how strong the intruders were, no one would get out alive after facing that monster. He was determined to use the creature as a weapon, planning to send it against the enemies to distract them and then strike the final blow himself. For that, he was holding a magical orb in his hands. Using it, he began issuing commands to the monster, as if it were just a pawn on his chessboard. Galt was incredulous to see Grans could control such a dangerous creature, and remarked that the power of that sacred treasure was truly frightening. Ji-Chenton, curious and confident, decided to test the monster's strength with a punch, but saw it didn't even leave a scratch on the creature, proving it was extremely tough. In a corner, Alice watched everything, clearly scared by what they were doing. He wanted to understand the plan better and asked what the goal of all this was. Grans then made it clear that no floor boss really mattered to them. The real objective was the orb, because outside that dungeon there was nothing else to fear. Glenn listened to this with concern while Grans continued explaining that with that orb they could even destroy a city. When the city was nearly in ruins, they would appear as saviors, defeat the monsters, and be celebrated as heroes. Glenn was shocked to hear this plan and couldn't believe what they were saying. He protested, demanding they release him immediately. Karts mocked him, asking if he even understood what they were proposing. Glenn insisted they let him go and tried to play it off as just a joke to break the heavy mood. But Grans, with a cold smile, said it really was a terrible joke. He revealed he saw the orb as the key to completely changing his miserable life, believing that, with it, he would become the most powerful of all. Full of arrogance, he raised the orb and said the entire world would have to bow to him. However, at that moment, the orb shattered into several pieces in front of everyone. The shock was total because no one could believe what was happening. The atmosphere grew even tenser when the eye of the monster before them began to glow an intense red. Without giving them any chance to react, the creature lunged, grabbed Galt with its claws, and crushed his body brutally without any mercy. Grans panicked and, realizing the disaster, ordered everyone to flee as fast as possible. Glenn was shouting that the monster was following them, but Grans told him to shut up and just run, warning that anyone left behind would die. As they ran, Grans thought to himself that he couldn't die in a place like that because his story couldn't end so pathetically. Karts wondered in despair how things had gotten to this point, but Alan interrupted him, saying it was better to save the questions for later and focus on staying alive. But at that critical moment, Alan felt a sharp pain in his back as he was struck. To his surprise, it was Grans himself who had attacked him. Confused and betrayed, Alan asked why he had done that. Grans explained that it was the leader's order and that Alan needed to face the monster to buy time for the others to escape. Alan, shocked, refused to act as bait, saying he would never do something so vile. Grans, trying to sound nobler, said he wasn't telling him to sacrifice himself as bait in a dirty way, but needed him to save his friends, just like the legendary Isaac, whom Alan so admired. Speaking in a cold tone, Grans told Alan not to disappoint him. He then activated a special ability on him called Warrior's Gathering, which had the power to draw the attention of all monsters to a specific target, whether a human or a weapon. At that moment, the monster was already right in front of Alan, ready to attack. Grans believed that if they could move deeper into the dungeon, the monster wouldn't be able to reach them, even being a floor boss. But suddenly he paused to reflect, feeling that something was very wrong. He thought that ever since that group of outsiders had arrived, everything had gone wrong for them. Then, amid the chaos, they all began to hear a strange music echoing through the corridors. The sound was eerie, and as it grew louder, they realized other monsters were approaching quickly, making their situation even more dangerous. Grans looked at the path ahead and reflected that he really wanted to avoid fighting monsters in the deeper layers of the dungeon, but with everything that was happening, they no longer had a choice. Soon after, he noticed something even more alarming. The creatures appearing weren't ordinary monsters, but sirens, beings known for their hypnotic song. Realizing the danger, Grans pressed his hands hard over his ears, shouting for everyone not to listen to that treacherous music. However, Glenn noticed something strange. Even with his ears covered, the melody kept flowing through his mind, impossible to block. Desperate to react, Grans tried to attack one of the sirens with his spear, but ended up paralyzed before he could complete the strike. The music grew stronger and stronger in their heads until Grans was completely dominated, falling into a state of brainwashing. Meanwhile, in another part of the dungeon, Rouge's group was fighting ordinary monsters. He took them down with steady blows while Alamira cheerfully hunted, saying she planned to dry that meat, make a good roast, and that it would go really well with a drink. In this calmer moment, Alicia became alarmed when she noticed something approaching at high speed. She commented that it wasn't just any monster, but a human presence. Soon after, the guild group appeared. running and stopping in front of them. Rude looked at them with disdain, remembering they didn't seem to have learned their lesson last time. But Alicia noticed Alan wasn't with them and realized something was very wrong. Before they could talk, Granz charged at Rude with his spear. Rude managed to block the attack with his sword, but immediately noticed Granz's movements were completely different, more aggressive and erratic. Using his analysis ability, Rude quickly understood that Granz was in a state of brainwashing. He warned the rest of the group about it. Soon after, Karts attacked Alicia, but she managed to defend herself firmly using her weapon, Erdeel. While Rude struggled to contain the brainwashed companions, Alamira casually asked if he needed help. But before she could react, Glenn tried to attack Alamira from behind. She turned quickly and blocked the strike effortlessly. Alamira, irritated, coldly commented that for a mere human to dare bare his fangs at her was the same as wishing for death. As she prepared to kill Glenn, Rude intervened, asking her not to do it. Alamira, surprised by the request, wanted to know the reason for such nonsense. Alamira explained in a harsh tone that since she had started living in that form, she had begun to understand humanity's rules differently. She said that people's insolent behavior was precisely because of those rules, and that even under brainwashing, those men were attacking with the intent to kill. Therefore, being in a dungeon, there was no reason not to kill them. Rude, however, insisted that he didn't want her to kill them. He remembered everything Alan had told him and explained that if she did that, Alan would be even sadder. Alamira couldn't hold back her laughter and mocked Rude, asking if he really cared about that blonde brat. But Rude answered seriously, saying he himself had forgiven monsters that killed his family when he was a child. That's why he knew very well how Alan felt at that moment. It was a very deep loneliness. He explained that friends were too precious, and for that reason he was asking Alamira to understand just this once. With a sigh, Alamira relented. She let go of Glenn's neck, giving him just a punch in the stomach to knock him out, saying at least she would leave him half dead. Alicia had also managed to defeat another enemy and mentioned it casually. Rude thanked her, relieved. Next, Rude used his Nomia ability to create an earthen hand to restrain another enemy, but Granz managed to break it with a spear strike. Seeing this, Rude told Alicia to leave him to him. He then activated his telekinetic charge, causing a controlled explosion that finally knocked Granz down. The fight ended with the three opponents lying unconscious on the ground. Sometime later, Granz regained consciousness and, proud, grumbled that he hadn't asked anyone to save his life. He sarcastically questioned what kind of attitude that was, saying the least he should do was thank them. Rude, however, ignored the provocations. He simply said the most important thing now was to know where Alan was. Granz tried to avoid the subject, looking away and dodging the question. Irritated, Rude pressed harder, demanding a clear answer. With no way to lie, Granz finally admitted they had left Alan on the dungeon's deepest floor. He explained it had been the only choice they had if they wanted to survive. Hearing this, Rude felt his fury rising even more, determined to solve it at any cost. Granz started shouting at Rude, saying it wasn't his fault because he hadn't had a choice. He tried to justify what he'd done, but Rude, overcome with rage, lost control and landed several punches on his face, calling him a bastard. After venting his anger, Rude took a deep breath and told everyone to get out of his way immediately before he regretted what he might do. He then turned to Alamira and Alicia, saying they needed to help Alan as quickly as possible. He asked them to lend him a bit of their strength for that. Alicia, serious, replied that he didn't even need to ask since of course they were going to help. After all, they were a group and had to act like one. Alamira, more carefree, commented that she thought Alan might not even be savable, but at least hoped for the best dinner ever in the end. Rude, trying to stay calm, thanked them both. He explained that in that case, they would go all in for the lower floors without hesitation. But at that moment, everyone felt something strange in the air, a heavy sensation coming toward them. They looked at each other, confused, trying to understand what it was. Alicia noticed that the sea around them was turning red, something completely abnormal. She wondered aloud how that was possible. Alamira, more experienced with magical energy, explained that it seemed the very nature of the sea had changed, becoming saturated with a high concentration of magical energy. Because of that, soon a large number of monsters would gather in that area. Alicia remembered that normally, when something strange happened inside a dungeon, the standard procedure would be to retreat to regroup and recover. But that day, the strategy had to be different. She said there was no way to run anymore, and that the only option was to advance with everything they had. Then, Alicia activated a spell to let everyone swim as fast as possible. The current began pulling them along, speeding up their crossing. They used the force of the water to reach the next floor more quickly. Some monsters appeared in their path, but they were defeated quickly thanks to their teamwork. As they advanced, Elamira asked curiously why Rude wasn't canceling her magic like he had done before. Rude paused to think and replied that he could do it if he wanted to. But Alicia explained that this wasn't ordinary support magic. She was actually asking Ordeal to manipulate the water flow to help them. She reminded Rude of when they had flown through the sky before, saying it was the same principle, using Ordeal's magic power to control the environment in their favor. As they kept swimming, they suddenly began hearing a strange song echoing through the water. They realized too late that they had run right into a group of sirens. Alicia became alarmed when she noticed that the song had the power to control minds. Rude, staying calm, said it was mind control and assured them he could handle it, since negative effects like that didn't work on him. Without hesitating, Rude moved in and drove his sword into one of the sirens' chests, explaining to himself that when monsters looked too human, he completely lost his appetite to cook or eat them. Alamira, however, mocked him, calling him pathetic, and said she would take care of it. She sliced the siren in half with one strike and separated the part that still looked like a fish, saying now he could cook it without guilt. The other two sirens, seeing this brutal scene, became terrified and fled quickly. Rude looked at the now clear path and said he would leave it at that since the top priority was reaching the deeper levels of the dungeon to find Alan. However, the two surviving sirens didn't go away for good. They only retreated far enough to activate a special ability called Song of Madness, which spread a hypnotic melody through the area. This song reached a group of Sahajin nearby, sending them into a frenzy. Alicia realized the danger and warned that a group of completely crazed Sahajin was heading their way. Rude asked her to be very careful, admitting that maybe they should have killed the sirens when they had the chance. He told her to get ready because the enemies were coming. Soon, they were fighting the school of Sahajin. Rude noticed there were so many he couldn't even track all their movements properly. Alamira, sounding irritated, remarked that those fishmen never learned and that maybe it was time to teach them another lesson. But before she could act with full strength, a squid monster appeared suddenly and used its tentacles to bind Alamira's arms and legs, immobilizing her. To make things even worse, a colossal sea dragon emerged in front of them. They understood instantly that because of the high concentration of magical energy in the sea, monsters from deeper levels were starting to rise to that floor, making the situation even more dangerous. Alamira looked at the scene seriously and commented that things had gotten a lot more complicated now that a sea dragon had shown up. She realized she had no other choice and told herself she would have to use a special move. She then shouted to Rude and Alicia, ordering them to draw the Sahajin away from her. She also told them to get away as fast as they could, making it clear that if they stayed there, they'd be caught in the explosion she was about to unleash. Rude, confused, and alarmed, wondered what the hell Alamira was planning. Alicia, meanwhile, felt a chill as she realized how serious things were. She told Rude she had a bad feeling about it, and that it was best to do exactly what Alamira was telling them without hesitation. At that moment, Alamira began to roar so fiercely that even the monsters themselves shrank back in fear. The roar echoed through the dungeon, creating a heavy silence before the chaos resumed. Alicia urgently pulled Rude, saying it was time for them to get out of there as quickly as possible. As they retreated, some Sahajin, confused by the roar and the general panic, ended up charging straight at Alamira and grabbed her tightly, trying to hold her down. Seeing this, Rude shouted her name, completely worried about what might happen to her. But Alamira, even while restrained, stayed calm and simply told him to watch. That was when an intense, almost blinding light filled the entire dungeon chamber. The light was so strong that everything seemed to freeze for an instant. When the glare finally began to fade, Rude and Alicia could see Alamira completely transformed into her true dragon form. Her presence dominated the space, immense and imposing, with gleaming scales and sharp eyes full of controlled fury. Alamira, now in her complete draconic form, stared down the sea dragon without any hesitation. With a powerful, echoing voice, she declared that everyone there would finally get the chance to witness a battle worthy of monsters, making it clear there would be no more holding back or mercy in that fight. Guys, I've already narrated all the chapters of this series. If you want me to keep bringing more chapters here, leave lots of likes and subscribe to the channel. Almost half the people watching aren't subscribed yet, so please support our work.